All right, everybody. Just trying to get everything. This is, check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. There we go. Um, okay, as usual, things are misbehaving. There we go. Again, I have not done one of these in a very long time. So, since the last time I did some live streams like this, we've switched computers around. So, a lot of things that I normally have access to do a live stream are not on this computer yet. Because of how busy we've been, I've not had time to move things on, but I wanted to get on board with everybody here as we are in the last few hours here. We're less than 6 hours away from the floodgates opening and the start of the first low power FM filing window in over 10 years. So a lot of people have been waiting for this. This is something that myself and many others in this community have been working for and been working very hard to get this window. I've known that this window was going to happen several years ago. I've had many discussions with Pete Doyle, who used to be the audio division chief at the FCC on the audio division side. Al Schuldner is now that person. And when Pete Doyle had said at the time that he really wanted to have a LPFM window and a non-commercial window. And when the discussion came up, I had mentioned at the time that it would be more favorable to have the full power window first and then have the LPFM window. Main reason is because there were, so that way we don't want to see LPFM stations going down on below 92 or on 92.1 and then being displaced by a full power NCE that comes in the next window. So the logic was to do the primary first, the secondary second. And that's the way they went ahead and did it. Now, when the FCC back in 2020, they came out with the reports and order on MB docket 19-3 and 19-193, that was the writing on the wall that the LPFM window was going to happen. We also had comments from Ajit Pai earlier than that, stating that there would be a LPFM, that there's going to be an LPFM window. So we have a lot of things. We had a lot of things going there. And I am questioning whether our signal is there. It is. Okay, I just want to make sure that our signal was streaming because I'm right now getting reds and yellows and all kinds of nasty things right now on YouTube. No audio. People are people okay. In the chat, let me know. In the chat, can you hear me? Okay, here I'll put it up there, right there in the chat. Can you hear me? Because I don't know if I can. Okay. All right. Greetings to Nestor Gonzalez from Puerto Rico. One of the folks we're working with in this upcoming filing window. Thank you for joining us, and we welcome everybody on board. Everybody on board. And we're just gonna let everything start moving its way up here so we can get more people on here. But I did want to throw in. I just wanted to get on and just have some final thoughts here before we go into this next window. This video is both for it. This video is for several different audiences. We'll say. Those who are involved with LPFM stations, of those who are already involved with LPFM stations, those who are already there, those who are going to want to be there in this next window, and also those who are supporting LPFM stations in assisting them and giving them advice and doing kind of Michi things out there, kind of Michi's angels out there going out and doing your thing and and doing this. Now, there's one thing about LPFM is we all get this idea that LPFM is all about community radio. It's all about bringing radio stations into bringing radio back to the people, which it is. And that's the nice thing about it. There's so many rules that have been put in place to protect the localism of LPFM. We have a cross-ownership rule, which for most LPFM situations, you can only have one station. You can only be on the board of one station. Also, too, there's localism requirements that either your headquarters or your board members have to be within 10 or 20 miles based on whether the county or area that that the transmitter site is in is considered as a Nielsen Top 50 market. And that's the delineation between 10 and 20 miles. So sometimes once you cross a county boundary, bam, you're in a different regulatory situation where it comes to that. So as you all probably know, LPFM is a non-commercial service, which means you cannot run commercials. You can get underwriting, you can get funding, you can raise funds. People can donate to the station. You can acknowledge for-profit businesses, but you cannot promote them. So you can identify but not promote. You can say things like the name of the business, a very short description, like lines of business. So let's say it's a Red Lobster, and they serve seafood and steaks. That's all you can say. You can't say they have the best seafood. You can give a location. You can give a phone number. You can give a website. You can give some of those very basic information pieces, but you cannot promote. You cannot, for example, you can't do a call to action. You can't just say, come on down, or call them now, or call us now. Also, another thing that also brings up another thing is when you're doing underwriting, the underwriting has to be the station thanking telling the listener that they're thanking the business. It cannot be like a time purchase. You can't like have the owner of the business come on and say, "Hi, this is Joe from Joe's Crab Shack. Come on down." You can't do that. That is a testimonial that is not allowed. recnet.com/compliance is a great source for knowing what you can and what you can't say. Question coming up on the chat: are you going to go through the application? Maybe. It all depends. This is a Tuesday night, and I'm going to save this piece to the very end because LMS usually has maintenance starting at 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays. So the system may or may not be there. We do have our screen up just in case that it does. Just in case that it is. So yeah, we can go through and fake up a very basic LPFM application and show you all the things that you're going to need. What we can talk about and what you can do. See, what you don't need hired help for, and what you don't need a lot of assistance from others with, is applications that do not require a second adjacent channel waiver. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about second adjacent channel waivers because they are tricky. And if you go to the FCC's channel finder and you look up the coordinates that you want to put a station at, and there's channels that come up with a green background, those don't require a second adjacent waiver, and those can be done fairly easily. And Sharon is on. Hello. All right. Sharon has been very, very, very involved with the LPFM movement. So involved, she wrote a book. I want you all to find this book on Amazon. Everybody who is on here who is aspiring to be an LPFM broadcaster, this is right here, this book, LPFM for Dummies. That is your owner's manual right there. This book is chock full of information that will get you from the application process through station operation. I can tell you right now. Now, a lot of people think that I'm like the LPFM know-it-all. And, I know a lot of things about things from especially the regulatory end, also some of the technical end. But where I fall short is on the studio audio chain, that kind of end, and some parts of the actual station business end, because the other folks have stations, and that's what they need to focus on. They need to focus on running their stations, running their business. Running an LPFM is a business. And I'll tell you right now, and Sharon knows this, I've learned a few things from this book. Yes, even the Michi. And so I do strongly suggest that you go to Amazon, that you go to wherever you buy your printed publications from. Again, this is not sponsored by For Dummies Books or by LPFM for Dummies or by Sharon or Art FM or anybody like that. This is a personal endorsement from the Michi. And, when you get a personal endorsement from the Michi, that is always a good thing. If you want to see other endorsements, go to recnet.com/recommendations. But first of all, I will be taking comments and questions in the chat. All right, so go down to the chat. I am watching the chat. Feel free to throw questions in there. I actually have kind of an agenda. So hopefully I won't get too derailed by comments, but I can, if necessary, I can break off, I can derail and answer questions. So feel free to throw the questions in there. And if we get into a bunch of questions and stuff like that, that would be fantastic. That would be fantastic because this is your chance to chat with Amici, and this is your chance to maybe get some questions answered. And also, too, if I don't have the answer, Sharon's on the chat. Maybe Sharon can chime in. Anybody else would be able to chime in. All right. I will get to a question because we're going to be getting into REC housekeeping issues here first. But a question that comes in for nonprofits who have contracted your service in the filing, will you notify them when they, when you file for them, and will they be able to immediately see the filing on the FCC's website? Okay, here's how that works. We go through stages. We're currently there's a lot of folks right now. Majority of our applicants right now are in what's called the ready for filing status. And what everybody who's going through me has access to the LPFM.app client portal. They can go in there. They can log in. We've given everybody who's gone through the show of interest form, they selected a password for that. For the few standbys that came in later after LPFM.app went away, we assigned you a password and we gave you access. When you go into the portal, you can't make any changes in there, but you can look. You go in the client portal and it will basically show you a screen that shows you what we see in our internal systems. Because the idea is we want to make sure we've got everything right before we put it on the application. But also in there's going to be a link to the draft application, and that will be a live application once everything is good. It should, if it works right, and we won't know this until after everything is up and everything is up and working, that it will show the live FCC status of pending or dismissed or granted and all that. There's also going to be a connection in there with the window tools, so you'll be able to see if your application is mutually exclusive. It will show your MX group information. So we'll get into that. But what will happen is if you are with REC, you have been getting emails throughout the whole process as you've gone from stage to stage, as you've we had, stage 2 with the location, with stage 3 with the parameters, stage 4 with the organization information. Every time you submitted information to us, if you advanced in the stage, we would tell you, yeah, you advanced to stage 4. Okay, when we went to, after everything is done, we go to final check. During final check, what happens is I actually go ahead and do a lot of your work for you. I do your exhibits. I do everything because I want to make sure that everything is right. I want to make sure that there isn't a gotcha. And, like, for example, if there's an FAA situation that comes up or something comes up, I want to make sure that we're able to nip that in the butt and say, hey, look, there's a problem or there's something we need to change or something like that. And that's what happens in final check. Now, once we go through final check, you'll get an email from us saying, hey, we're through final check. It's ready for invoice. We send the invoice on a separate email. And a lot of you have already gone through this process. Now, what's going to happen is, as far as filing goes, the REC applications, our first day of filing is going to be Thursday. We're not gonna file on Wednesday. I may run a couple through on Wednesday just to make sure everything is good on the FCC's end. So we may see a couple applications get filed on Wednesday, but the bulk of our applications will be filed on Thursday. And the reason for that is because I think the system is going to be a lot slower on the first day. Just because everybody's going to have that first day rush that they want to get in there, they want to try to be first. Now, this is a misnomer that filing before everybody else gives you an advantage. That is not true. Applications that are filed anytime between 12:01 this coming morning and 6 p.m. Eastern on next Wednesday will be considered simultaneously filed. So it doesn't matter when you filed during that period, it's all considered simultaneous. Everything will be considered filed on the 13th. That's pretty much, that's called the snapshot date. You might have heard that reference in some of the public notices, the snapshot date. Snapshot date is the 13th. That's what everything is based on. The 2 years local presence is based on the snapshot date, the 13th. So as long as you've got everything in order, on the 13th of December, then you'll be good to go on that. So what's going to happen is when the applications are actually filed on Thursday, you're going to get an email, just like you have been in the whole process. And that email is going to pretty much just say, hey, it's filed. Here's your file number. Now, we've already provided you all with a link to look at the draft, to look at the application. There is a way to look at applications before they're filed. But the thing is that it's not easy to do. You have to know a 32-byte hexadecimal application ID. This is a lot different than the way CDBS was. CDBS was just simply integer numbers that just increased with every application. This is a 32-character, basically like a password. It's a very long code. So what we do is we provide you with that link so you can look at that. Now, once that application goes live and is actually filed, then you will see it. It will show. It'll show pending or submitted. Seeing it in the FCC live systems. Now, this is the second filing window for LMS. In the previous system, CDBS, it took several days for the LPFM applications to show up in the FCC live systems as well as in the raw data that the FCC sends out to data providers like myself. And but we're expecting that the applications will be visible live in the FCC system probably about a couple hours, maybe an hour or two after the window closes. If it's going to behave like the NCE window, with the NCE window that we had 2 years ago for the full power non-commercials, right at 6 o'clock, the system choked up. It didn't work. The system went into a downtime mode, and then it started to come back at about, I'd say probably about 7:30 or so. And then at that time, it was by about 8 o'clock in the evening, the system was stable. And that's when we threw our ELMS application in there, our internal application that goes out and looks at every single application one at a time and scrapes all the information off of it and puts it into our databases. So I think that you're going to be able to see the applications in public systems probably as late as like 8 o'clock in the evening. And then it should show up in the FCC raw data dump the next day, for the next day. So I think the system's going to work out pretty well. Now, another place where all the applications are going to show up is in the REC window tracker, and that's recnet.com/window. Right now, that tool is defaulted to the NCE window. Once we get all the data into the tracker tool, you'll be able to, the system will be redefaulted over to the LPFM window. There is a way that you can change windows in the tracker tool. So if you do need to look at the NCE window for whatever reason, or you want to go look at the 2013 window, all the non-commercial filing windows are in there. The original LPFM window's in there, the 2007 window for full power, the full power allotment window in 2010 is in there, as well as the 2013 LPFM and the 2021 NCE are all in there. And actually, this window is already in there. It's just there's no data yet. Just the documents. So yeah, you'll get an email with the file number, with that, we'll put that same draft link. We'll put that same link in there that we put in the previous email, the same one that shows in the portal. Now, you may not see the statuses showing up in the portal until after the close of the window and after everything is released. That's when because those statuses come from our ELMS system, and until our ELMS system can see the applications filed, we can't work with them until, we can't do anything on that system until they're actually in the FCC public view. So, because that's what we use. We use the FCC's public view to get that information. So until it's there. But the nice thing about the applications not showing up until after the window closes is the fairness. Because now nobody can see who's filing what. Total secret. There's no public view in there to see. For example, if you go in on the third day of the window, you won't be able to see who filed on day 1 and day 2. You won't see that, because then somebody could come in and torpedo your application. You don't want, so the system is totally fair in that way, that it's going to wait until the close of the window, and then sometime after the close of the window, the FCC is going to spill everything out, and that's how this works. And then our systems will pick up, and then what we're going to do is, once we get all the applications loaded, then there's programs that we're going to run, which will probably run on Friday or over the weekend, that will actually try to determine which of the applicants are mutually exclusive and with who. We're going to build our own groups of mutually exclusive applications over here. These will not be the official MX groups for FCC purposes, but for LPFM, doing MX groups is very easy to do on a systematic basis. So our information should match right up with the FCC once they release their list, and that will usually happen about a month after the window closes. And I think the only difference between the two lists is going to be is that they're going to have different group numbers than we are. So we're going to have an REC group number, and then we're going to, once the FCC's list comes out, then we renumber all of our MX groups to match up with what the FCC has. That's the way we did it in the 2021 NCE window. System worked really good during that time. REC Network's housekeeping items. The standby that we've been running for a few days, because there's been a lot of increased interest in the window. I've had to close standby. So we closed standby this morning. And the reason is mainly because we have a lot of we still have some pending work that still needs to be done. We have a lot of folks we have some folks that are, I don't want to say they're feet draggers, but they are taking a little bit more time to get us the information that we need. We still have a few that are in final check that haven't paid. And the thing is that once they pay, we're able to turn them around and take them right to ready for filing, within a very short period of time. We did one standby this morning where they paid, where we got them to final check. They gave us the last information. We got them to final check. We sent out the invoice. They paid the invoice, and we got them ready. We got them to ready for filing before 12 noon today. So, once you get through the payment, from there it's easy street on both ends, because it's a very easy process for us to do the rest of the work and get that going. And so we have a cutoff date of the 11th for anybody who has already received an invoice, because what we want to do is at 12 noon Eastern time on Monday the 11th. If you haven't paid by that time, there's no guarantee we're going to be able to get you in the window. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut off any pending invoices at that time that haven't been paid. We're going to cut them off at that time. If they, for whatever reason, pay afterwards, then, there's no guarantee that they'll get it. and there's no refunds. We made it very clear up front that there are no refunds in these processes, and that's pretty much where it's at. Now, currently in our shop at REC, we currently have 64 applications ready to go. We have 64 applications and at least 11 right now that are still somewhere down in those other processes. So we got quite a few of them through. So as you can tell, we've been busy. And then we have about another 16, and there's probably going to be a few more that are going to come in. That'll be wholesale. These are other consultants who have asked REC to handle just the second adjacent waiver aspect of an application, and so we've been doing wholesales. We've been doing wholesale requests for, like I said, for other consultants. So overall, it looks like we're going to be, as long as everybody follows through between the retail and the wholesale business, we're going to be in 34 states plus Puerto Rico. We have a lot of Puerto Rico. I was really surprised how much Puerto Rico we got in this window. We are pretty much covering most of the very populated portions of the island. I was very impressed with the Puerto Rico turnout. The Puerto Rico turnout was possible because of two things. Number one, the FCC changed the rules. And this was something that we kind of asked for a few years ago, and that is the change to 73825, which is the Channel 6 protection rule, where an LPFM's anybody who goes below, a LPFM that's below 92 has to meet certain distance separations to Channel 6 TV stations. One thing that has changed since 2013 and now was the establishment of a Channel 6 low-power TV station in Puerto Rico, W06DA-D. And the second part was that I've dealt with the owner of W06DAD for quite a few years on different things, and we've worked on some various things in the past, and I was able to get a blanket agreement from him to say, hey, look, if we have anybody that's going on 88.5 through 91.9, I want, we have blanket consent to say that the owner of Channel 6 is okay with that. And so this is how we're able to get a whole bunch of applications in Puerto Rico, because right now in Puerto Rico, on most of the island, the only thing available right now are reserve band channels. So we were very lucky to get that done and get that going. And so hang on here. Let's see what's going on here. Let's see here. How is local origination hours being interpreted currently? Okay, good question. One thing that you need to know about the local hours, the 8-hour pledge, and this is the same for the main studio pledge. These pledges only really have any teeth to them if your application becomes mutually exclusive and your points are used to eliminate somebody else. That's the only time if your application comes in as singleton out of the window, or let's say after the window closes, you're mutually exclusive, but eventually down the road, by the time the second settlement window comes, you're able to find a channel to move off to and become singleton, then you don't have to worry about the main studio or the 8 hours of local programming that you pledged. However, if it's a situation, let's say you're in a group of 2 applicants, you're a 5-point applicant, the other applicant is a 4-pointer, the other applicant is not able to move off the channel and do something else and it gets to that final point of where the FCC scores everybody, and their application gets dismissed and yours gets granted based on those points, then the main studio and local programming pledges come into play. Okay, that was part one. Part two. The rules, it's in 73872. It does define what local programming is considered. I kind of disagree with these rules. I feel that they should be modernized. These rules were written many years ago, back before the days of things like voice tracking and back way before COVID. But pretty much it's going to be in 73872A2. And local programming is defined by the FCC rules as licensee-produced call-in shows, music selected and played by a disc jockey present on site. That's the one I've got a little issue with. Broadcasts of events at local schools and broadcasts of musical performances at a local studio or festival, whether recorded or live. Local origination does not include the broadcast of repetitive or automated programs or time-shifted recordings of non-local programming, whatever its source. In addition, local origination does not include a local program that has been broadcast twice, even if the licensee broadcasts the program on a different day or makes small variations in the program thereafter. So, in other words, reruns don't count. You can't record a show, a 2-hour show, and then run it 4 times to meet your 8 hours, is basically what they're saying there. Now, whether the FCC is going to enforce this or not, they've never have. A lot of this came in 2013. And one of the things that the FCC did not do when they granted these construction permits and licenses, they did not put conditions on the license regarding these. And since 2013, we've had renewals, and nobody had ever challenged a station that may have been subject to the pledge. There's currently about 80 stations right now across the country that are subject to the pledges because of their outcomes from the 2013 filing window. No one has ever challenged a station based on meeting the local programming or the main studio requirement. The FCC has never put those as conditions on licenses or construction permits. Now, that may change. That may change with the next window. We don't know. We won't know until it happens. But we'll have a list. We have a list right now. You go to recnet.com/pledges, PLEDGES, and you'll see a listing of the 80 or so stations that are currently subject to the pledge. That's a list that I manually maintain, and that it has all that information on there of who's subject to the pledge and who's not. Let's see. Can I fill my high school radio station in Nassau County, Long Island? I have a problem with no frequency in Nassau County. Well, if there's no frequency, there's no way you can do it. This is the one thing there's no waivers like that. You cannot. The Local Community Radio Act prevents waivers on co-channel and first adjacent. There's a specific statute that says that the FCC cannot reduce the minimum distance separations between LPFM and full-service stations on co-channel, first adjacent, and even second adjacent. But the statute also allows for the waivers for second adjacent if a technical showing can be made that there will be no interference to any other radio service. So that's pretty much what we've got there. Now, amending applications, what can and can't you do? Let's say you file an application on the first day of the window. And once you put the signature certification name in there, you hit the certify button, you get the file number. You relook at your application and you're like, oh shit, I've screwed up something. Okay, here's the deal. You can go, as long as the window has not closed, as long as we're not at next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can go in there and do an amendment and make any change that you want, no matter how major, how minor it is. You can make any change you want, and it will still be considered, it will be considered that amended version once it goes out, once the window cuts off on the 13th. Now, if you screw up during the window, and then you realized you screwed up, but you didn't realize it until after the window closes, that's a lot different. Because the only thing that you can do after the window closes is do anything that's minor, and doing things that are otherwise not allowed, that are otherwise allowed. One of the big things is you screw up your points. Let's say that let's say that you forgot to claim, the local programming pledge point during the window. And then about a week or two after the window closes, you go and you look at your application in the FCC public system, or you look on the REC window tool, and and you're mutually exclusive, and it shows you with a lower point total. And then you look at your application, you're like, oh my God, I forgot to claim that. And you cannot go back in and claim the point. Once the window closes, you cannot amend your application to improve your comparative position. So that means you cannot add the main studio point, you can't add the diversity point, you can't add the local programming point, you can't add the established community presence point. You cannot change the local establishment date, which is used for the tiebreaker. You cannot change it to an earlier date. Now, what you can do is you can remove points. You are allowed to, you're allowed to make your situation worse, but you're not allowed to make your situation better. Let's say you filed and you put in that your organization was founded in 1968, and your corporation papers say 1986. You see the error, so you go in and amend the application. All you're doing is just changing that community presence, that community presence date from 1968 to 1986. That would be allowed because you're not improving your position. You're actually making your position. You may be actually making your position worse. Now, if it goes the other way, you're a 1968 organization. You typo and put 86. You won't be able to change it back. You won't be able to change it to 68. That comes up with another thing is, what if there's conflicts between information that's in the that's on the application versus information that is in any written exhibit? The FCC has been very clear on this one. Is the FCC, if it's required information on the application, and this will happen sometimes with geographic coordinates when you're putting in locations. You may have a technical study done, and it might have been at one location. When you type the application in, maybe you typo the degrees of the latitude by 1 degree. We've seen this happen quite a few times. After the window closes, you can't just change that 1 degree off, because guess what? That's a major change. Even though your documentation, your exhibits are correct, the FCC looks at the 4 corners of the application. And the same goes with the claims, with the point claims. And that's one of the things that you need to do, especially if you're going to be claiming the community presence point. It is very important, very, 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 very important that you read the specific instructions, the specific Form 318 instructions involving that, because you really have to include some kind of documentation that proves that either your headquarters or your 75% of your board has been within the 10 or 20 miles for the past 2 consecutive years. There's a few ways you can do this. If your original corporation papers show a local headquarters address, then you should be fine. If your organization shows a different headquarters that's more than 10 or 20 miles away, and that's what you're basing local presence on, then maybe if you include maybe your annual report from 2021 or from 2020 that shows your organization at the location within 10 or 20 miles. There's also a declaration process in there. It's in the instructions that just basically states that you can put a declaration in there in case there's a conflict in the, like I said, just in case your organization has moved. And some states don't publish the filings or require you to make annual filings and stuff like that. All depends on your state. As long as you put in a declaration with the infamous under penalty of perjury, they'll accept that. Again, the information is in the Form 318 instructions, fcc.gov/forms, and then go down to 318 and just click on the 318, and then you'll get the PDF document that has the forms, that has the form instructions. Now, one of the things about the form instructions is that they were written in the CDBS format and not in the LMS format, which is a massive pet peeve that I have right now with the FCC on these instructions. It makes things very confusing because it doesn't follow the LMS flow. And the actual example document that they include with the instructions is actually kind of what the old CDBS form looked like. Unfortunately, there's this governmental bureaucracy called the Office of Management and Budget that has to approve any time that a federal agency collects information from the general public for any reason. They're also the holders of the infamous Paperwork Reduction Act. Sometimes you look on federal documents, whether it's an FCC form, your tax forms, or whatever, and you always see that Paperwork Reduction Act notice. This you're expected to take an hour and a half to fill this out. If you don't think that is that way, let us know. That's all a part of the OMB approval process. And anytime a form is changed, it has to go through the OMB process. Again, questions in the chat, please. Please derail me with questions. And actually, the question that was just asked about the local community presence did hit on our second bullet point for reminders, and that is the local, making sure that you're able to justify that point claim. And keep in mind that if you don't justify the point claim before the window closes, and then after the window closes, you try to add something, whether or not someone has called you out on it through an informal objection or a petition to deny, you can't do it because that's an attempt to improve your comparative position. We had the same thing happen in the NCE window. In the NCE window, we had applicant, one of the points is diversity, and the diversity rule in full power is because full power allows for multiple ownership. You cannot claim the full power diversity point if your organization or a party to your organization already has a broadcast holding in an area where the two contours would overlap, and you can't claim it. But the FCC requires you to include either a contour map or some other information or declaration that says, yeah, we don't have anything there. Some people forgot to do that, and they claimed the point. They were called out. We called them out through the tool. Some people took the lead from our tool and called them out, and was able to get those points adjusted, which would cause another applicant to win. So it's one of the things about this window is filing windows are very competitive if you're in a situation where you're mutually exclusive. But hang on. But that's pretty much it. You just cannot improve your position. There are some other fatals. If you put a board member on who's had a pirate past, they've had a notice of unlicensed operation or some other thing in the 2013 window. The FCC was accepting police reports and information from like Florida, where there's a state pirate radio law, to say, hey, this person was involved in pirate radio. They cannot be involved in LPFM. The LPFM pirate ban is a federal statute. It was in the original it was in the actually it was in the FCC rules from the get-go. It was originally in the original FCC rules from 2000. It was put in stone in late 2000 with the Radio Broadcast Preservation Act, which was the attempt by the National Association of Broadcasters and a very old leadership at the National Public Radio to try to quash LPFM by removing the ability, by imposing third adjacent protection requirements, which at the time in 2000 was a very novel concept. And the NPR and the NAB were scared to death that all this interference was going to happen. The NAB even commissioned these audio CDs that went out to all the members of Congress, and did this really horrible simulation of what third adjacent interference would sound like to radio stations in the DC metro area. If you go back to listen to one of our podcasts, I played the entire recording on there. And anybody who does anything with broadcast audio, with broadcast engineering, you'll be rolling on the floor laughing with that. So we've got that. Educational statements. This is a big one that we're having to do a lot of hand-holding on over here, is the educational statements. Now, in 2013, the FCC was pretty lax on the educational statements. I mean, they let a lot of things just go through. And I think it was because they were under pressure to get these out, and so they were kind of just rubber stamping things. Now, what happens is during the calm after the storm, which is the last 10 years, things calm down, leadership changes, and there's a different attitude regarding educational statements. And we see this in the few applications that go through that involve assignments of licenses. You know, when a license is being changed from one nonprofit organization to another, that other nonprofit organization has to qualify as a non-commercial educational broadcaster, and the way they do it is by doing a educational statement similar to like the one that has to be filed by the organization during the window. The FCC has gotten really strict on those educational statements. Pretty much what they're looking for is they're looking for an organization's educational objectives without radio, and how the radio station is going to advance those educational objectives, either through over-the-air teaching or instruction. Now, some folks have tried to do, we're going to bring high school kids in. We're going to teach them how to run the board, how to manage the station, how to read the meters and all that. No, the FCC does not consider a broadcast school as NCE qualified. It has to be over-the-air teaching or instruction. Now, this is a 1940s policy. Basically, it's a 1940s, 1950s policy. When the FCC first licensed non-commercial radio stations, educational stations, they licensed them only to school systems. And the original and the programming on the original 1940s vision of reserve spectrum non-commercial educational radio was for the delivery of academic courses to radio receivers that are in remote classrooms. In other words, it was the earliest form of distant learning. And that's what it was originally. It was originally for in-school broadcasting. In the 1950s, the Moody Bible Institute said, hey, look, we are an academic school, but we're not in a school system. We're just as capable of education. And we want to be able to use the station to educate the public. The FCC said, okay, good. And that's where the educational statement came in and said, look, you have to be, we can qualify a school. We can qualify our school or college based on their accreditation, their state accreditations, their national accreditations. We have ways of doing that. And the rules, and 73503 has that right there in the rules. It does say that schools can be qualified based on their accreditation. However, for a non-school, for something that is maybe not an academic school, you have to make a showing that you are able to provide, that you are able to provide an educational service. And that's what the educational statement is for. So remember that it's what the organization does without radio, how the radio station is going to advance those educational objectives. Also, what helps is that if you put in a sample of programming that you may carry, including a short statement on how that program is going to teach or instruct over the radio. Again, basing your educational statement on providing a broadcast training course within your station studio walls is not going to cut it. There's got to be some kind of external education campaign. Now, here's the kicker. This is just a process to get you through the door. This is a formality to get you through the door. Once you're in, the rules do specifically state that you can run educational and entertainment programming, whatever schedule you want. You're not obligated to run those programs you put in your educational statement. There's this little thing called the First Amendment that kicks in afterwards. And, but yeah, I mean, the FCC has no specified ratios. They don't say you got to run at least 20% educational, 80% entertainment. They don't do that. You can run whatever you want. You can put on there, like, we have our sample educational statement out there. You could come out and say, yeah, we're all about educating people on basket weaving, and get your construction permit based on that. And then, turn around and run, and run 24 hours a day of punk country. You can do that, okay? The rules will allow it. Sorry about that. This is what smoking does to you. Don't start smoking. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Let's rummage through the questions here and see what we've got here. Is anyone still on FCC staff who would have interesting reactions to an application by the Stephen Dunifer International Talk Like a Pirate Day Trust? Okay. I think there's still a few people. Now, there's definitely people who were around in 2013 that are still involved at the FCC. Jim Bradshaw, for example, he's been there forever. Dale Bickle's been there forever. There's quite a few people in staff who've been there for quite a long time. If somebody wanted to start an organization called the Stephen Dunifer Talk Like a Pirate Day Trust, as long as Steve Dunifer or anybody else who has ever received an NOUO from the FCC, telling them, that they're running pirate radio, as long as nobody like that is on the board of directors and is not a party to the application, and the organization can put in a good educational statement. I don't see an issue. I don't see an issue. The FCC cares about who's on the board. But back to the serious. What percentage of filings are mutually exclusive or expected to be so? Good question. I don't have those numbers right in front of me. Actually, maybe I do. Hold on. Let's go and let me see if I've got anything in the window tool from 2013. We can go into the window tool and actually, why am I doing it there? Let's do it over here. All right. Hang on, kids. We're going to the internet. As soon as my... All right, we're going to go to the infamous... This is the window tracking tool, by the way. This is the tool I'm talking about that, and as you can see, it's set right now for the 2021 NCE window. But if you come down here to change window, look at there. We have all kinds of filing windows in this tool. We're going to go to the 2013 LPFM window. And now we have all the information in the 2013 window. We can click on MX groups. And we can see that there's a bunch of MX groups. It unfortunately doesn't give a final count, but but the MX group numbers did get up to 402, I think, the last time. So some of these groups may have been dissolved. Actually, we can include the dissolved groups in there. When an MX group is dissolved, that means that one of the applicant, that there were changes that were made in the MX group after the MX group was declared that made the applications, that made everybody singleton. And there was no need for an MX group anymore. So you can see the ones there in the gray background are the ones that were dissolved. So, yeah, there were quite a few. There was a total of 406 MX groups in the previous LPFM window. So when you figure that each one of those groups may have had would have had to have had at least 2 applications in it, and some had 3, and in the case of one group in Los Angeles, it had 32. That kind of gives you an idea of where that's at. Now, if we go look at the singletons, click on the singleton button here, and we'll wait for those to come up here. Hopefully the system will behave. There's a lot of singletons, though. Yeah, we've got a ton of singletons. Look at all those singletons. Now, of course, not everybody made it. Applications are dismissed for various reasons. Let's see if it gives a count on the end. 1,538 singletons. So we've had, 1,500 singletons. And then you figure 402 groups, 406 groups with at least 2 applicants in each of those MX groups. So that kind of, it comes out to, I think there was like about 3,000 and something. So, I mean, if we look at this, it's a little bit, it's kind of near the half and half, but I think that the number of MX applications were definitely slightly exceeded the number of singletons. So I would say probably about a 55-45 or maybe a 60-40 split on those various applications. So that's pretty much what we had in the last window for LPFM. Now let me get back over to the other box here. Come on. Don't ever get involved with computers, whatever you do. Best advice I give everybody. Let me get back to the chat here. Let's throw some of these questions out here. Best guess on when application. Okay, good question. Best guess when application process begins and first construction permits will be granted. Okay, fantastic question. Because it will depend on whether the application comes out of the window as a singleton or is mutually exclusive. If the application is singleton, and this means that there's no other applicant on the same channel within 24 kilometers, no other applicant that's on a first adjacent channel within 14 kilometers. Those applications are singleton. What will happen is, as I mentioned before, about a month after the window closes, the FCC should release the list of mutually exclusive groups. Now, that list will only include what applicants are in which groups. It will not include scores. The scores have not been done yet. What will happen after that is any of the applications that are singleton from that point forward will eventually show up on the FCC's broadcast applications public notice, the applications public notice. If you go to FCC Today, fcc.today, and you watch those daily public notice, they come up in the FCC releases section, and it just says applications. You get one of those every business day. You click on that, and it shows all the applications, and it will show the ones that were accepted for filing. That starts a 30-day clock. During those 30 days, after the application's been accepted for filing, it says accepted for filing, and it will actually probably even give a little phrase that says, petitions to deny may be sent within 30 days. Once it hits that public notice and it goes to that 30 days, what will happen is that there's that 30-day wait, because during that time anybody can file a petition to deny or an informal objection that why this application should not be granted. After that 30 days is over with, give it a few days for staff to do their thing, especially with a lot of these applications. They're going to probably be busy. And as long as there's been no issues with informal objections or petitions to deny, and if the FCC does not find any technical or administrative issues on their little final check of the application, then it will get granted. This is singleton. We're estimating that the first singletons will be granted out of this window in late February. Late February to early March will be the first singletons. Now, for the MX, the mutually exclusive applications, what's going to happen with them is, first of all, there's going to be, when that MX notice comes out, there's going to be a 60-day window that's going to open up. It's going to be a settlement window. And during that settlement window, the MX applicants then can reach, let's say there's two applicants that are in an MX group, and let's say they just agree that they want a timeshare. One applicant gets 12 hours a day, the other one gets 12, whatever a voluntary timeshare agreement that they want to do. As long as it's a universal settlement and it involves everybody in the group, so like a group of 2 or a group of 3, everybody gets together and says, yeah, we'll share the channel. At that time, they can submit a settlement and say to the FCC, yeah, we're going to share the channel. And if that's the case, then the FCC will put that on a 30-day public notice, just like the singletons. And then 45 days later, as long as there's no issues, 3 construction permits get granted, 2 construction permits get granted, conditioned with the timeshare agreement on there. So that's how that works. Also, during that settlement window, minor changes can be made. Minor changes are changes to first, second, third adjacent channels. It can also be changes to what's called intermediate channels, which is 53 or 54 channels up or down, which is 10.6 or 10.8 on the dial. You can also move up to 11.2 kilometers, or in some situations where the terrain is wacky, if the 60 dB contour of your original proposal has some overlap with the 60 dBu contour of where you want to move, even if it's more than 11.2 kilometers, you can make that move. You're allowed to make moves of more than 11.2 kilometers if you are going to be co-locating with another LPFM station that is in your MX group and you're going to be time sharing with them. If it's part of a timeshare agreement, then you can do that. So, and that's what will happen there. Now, for those who don't do anything in that 60-day window, then the waiting happens. The FCC then goes through, will eventually get to the point hearing process. Now, what is this process? This is where what will happen is that the Media Bureau will then go ahead and they will check the applications that are still MX'd, and they'll determine what the scores are for each of those applications. They're going to look at the applications. They're going to take the deductions. Like, for example, if somebody claims local presence, and let's say their organization was established a year ago, they'll adjust that point off of there. And then what happens is, and this is a bureaucratic issue. This is a bureaucratic formality. It's just based in the way that authority is delegated to the Media Bureau by the full commission. It is considered a point hearing. It's considered a hearing. So what will happen is that the Media Bureau will draft up what these results are. This will be submitted, or we call it in the industry circulated. It will be circulated to the commissioners, to the 5 commissioners that are sitting on the FCC. What will eventually happen is this will come up as an agenda item, and it will have some really tricky name to it. You won't know that it's a point hearing unless you know the insides, and it's usually something that is not discussed at the meeting itself. It's one of those items that's usually adopted before the meeting and then taken off the agenda. But you know it's coming because it will be on the agenda usually. And then, because what happens is that the FCC needs to vote on the overall finding of the commission and of the overall finding of the Media Bureau. They just say, okay, we're good with this, rubber stamp. We got 3 or 5 votes, on that. Okay, good to go. Okay, and then it's adopted, and then it's published, and that's when. And then what will happen is that when that notice is released, there will be a 90-day. First of all, the scores will be published, and also to every applicant that's on there that has a score of 5 or a high score in that group, which is usually 5 is the highest, unless you're tribal, 6 is highest. Those will be considered the tentative selectees, and then there's a whole process as from there. So what will happen is a 90-day window will open up. And in that 90-day, that's a 90-day settlement window. Again, you can reach timeshare agreements. You can also make major changes to your facility. So let's say you want to go to a channel that's not the first, second, or third adjacent channel to try to get out of an MX group. Let's say you want to move to a location that's more than 11.2 kilometers away to get out of an MX group. That's your opportunity to do it. That will be the time to do that. And then you'll have a 90-day window. Now, the other thing that you can do is that if you are one of the lead applicants in the group, let's say there's 3 5-point applicants in the group, regardless of 4s. Let's say there's 3 5-point applicants in the group. Your application, let's say you're applicant A, and then so you got B and C. Let's say that during that 90-day window, applicant A and applicant C get together and say, hey, we'll do a timeshare. We'll share the channel. You try to focus, in attempts to reach applicant B, either fall onto crickets, or they're like, no, we don't want to timeshare with you, or no, you're not compatible with what we want to do, and we're faith-based, you're secular, we're conservative, you're woke, whatever, whatever they want to say. So you got A and C that want to go into a timeshare. B doesn't. A and C can submit the timeshare during that second 90-day window, and they can aggregate their points together and say, hey, we're going to have a 2-party timeshare group. Now, here's what happens. A and C now have 10 points because they've aggregated their scores. They each have 10 points. Well, guess what? Station B only has 5 because they didn't want to play along. And so A and C get the channel on the timeshare as a timeshare. B gets dismissed. And then, of course, main studio and local programming pledges go into effect in that case. And that's the point aggregation. Now, only the groups with lead scores can aggregate together. So, like, let's say you have an MX group with 3 5s and a 4. The 4 and the 5 cannot timeshare together to make 9. Likewise, you have a 5-point applicant in the group, and let's say there's 3 4-point applicants in the group. If all 3 4-point applicants come together and say, we want to do a timeshare here, you can't aggregate the 4 points to make 12 because they're not the lead applicant because there's a 5 in the group. That won't be. The 5 will get it. The 4s will go away. So that's kind of how the process works for timeshare. Now, what's going to happen is with those groups, those are going to take time. And what the FCC did in 2013 was they divided the country into 3 areas. They did the western U.S., they did the northeast, and then the southeast. That's how they kind of divided it up. And they put out 3 different releases, 3 different orders over about a 1.5 year time span for each of these areas. Remember, we have to have that 90-day window in there, and so it could take, in some MX situations, it could take up to 1.5 to 2 years to get a construction permit. If your application is MX, it all depends on how the FCC is going to handle. Obviously the FCC is going to need to know how many groups there are MX, how many of them get dissolved before the second window. Some of them will get dissolved early on. We saw all those dissolved groups. A lot of those dissolved early on, or they dissolved in the 90-day period for the second window, because that's when the major changes could be done. Some applicants voluntarily dismissed. Some of them just, so that's pretty much how that works. So if you're MX, I would say expect a wait. Worst case scenario is a couple years. Now, of course, if one of the things that can happen in that second window, because petitions to deny open up to all the tentative selectees, is there could be challenges. That's where petitions to deny. That also opens the 30-day window for petitions to deny. The first 30 days of that 90-day window is also a petition to deny period. So let's say you have year's 2 5-point applicants in the group, and one of the 5-point applicants, you feel that they don't qualify for a point, or they've got something in there that would otherwise disqualify them. Another MX applicant in the group could file a petition to deny against the other application, saying, "Hey, look, there's problems here." And if that's the case, then this could get hung up for several months, a couple years. So it could take some time. We're still working. I mean, we're 2 years now since the NCE window's closed, and we still have several MX groups right now. There's about 10 or 12 MX groups out of 240 something that are still under contention right now because of informal objections and petitions to deny and other things. Some of these are issues that the FCC came up with. There was the whole Cesar Guel issue that's going on. We noticed that some of the Hector Guevara applications, that's Centro Cristiano Vida Eterna out of Houston. Some of their applications are right now hung up for various reasons. An application that I started an objection on, basically as an administrative challenge to how the FCC handles a certain new rule that was established a few years ago. That one's still hung up right now. So, yeah, it could take some time. This is going to be a patience thing. But if you can get out of there with the singleton, yeah, that's going to be easy street. But once you get into the MX, that's where things get tricky because it becomes a dog pile, and they've got to start clearing people out of that dog pile. And whoever's at the bottom that has the football, well, they've got the ball. Simple as that. Education, that's the idea of public service as a Communications Act charge, not as some secondary off-air business or charity, not related to the station licensee. Well, one of the things that the FCC one of the things the FCC, of course, has encouraged the whole entire time is that existing organizations that provide some kind of an educational outreach of some kind, whether it's like a civil rights organization, a human services organization, and various things like that, and for that matter, every church or ministry that's out there, that they're the ones that were encouraged to get stations. If anything, it was originally a lot of the national organizations like the NAACP, like La Raza, and various other ethnic rights organizations that were the really big pushers of LPFM back in the late 90s and the early days. And if anything, when LPFM was first created, there was originally going to be an ownership cap of 10 stations nationwide. But the first window was going to be the Head Start in 2000 and 2001. That was the Head Start window. And in that window, they only allowed local applicants and they only allowed one. The idea was eventually they were going to open up another window and allow organizations to pick up more stations. And, well, what happened in 2003 was the FCC doing this stupid thing called Auction 83, which was what we called the Great Translator Invasion. Suddenly, there were 14,000 translators that were applied for across the United States, most of them coming from a single filer in Twin Falls, Idaho. And that just changed everything. And then the rules changed. We went to local only. We went to one per customer. And that's, if anything, the Great Translator Invasion was a godsend where it comes to those of us who were trying to keep LPFM stations local and out of the hands of bigger organizations wanting to monopolize areas and monopolize spectrum. So actually, that was a good thing. Let's see. How about a school administrative unit, an entity that oversees several schools in a jurisdiction? In other words, a school district. Yeah, nothing wrong with a school district being a licensee. Now, the localism rule does say headquarters or campus. So if let's say this, and we see these, we have these out there, because of legal reasons. Let's say a high school wants a station. Let's say they want to put a station in a public high school. The station is actually licensed to the school district because that is the responsible party for that school. They can base their 10 or 20 miles off of the actual campus. So that's already being done. Now the question is, what if two schools want it? That's where you run into the possibility of cross ownership. So we're not going to go there. Hang on. Okay. Totally off subject question here. Have you listened to the 1970s TM format promotional holiday album B-side with K9 Kitty Radio? Yes. Get that baby bullshit off the air and let's boogie partner. Yes. Yes. Tomorrow Radio was what that was called. And it was a great spoof of what radio was predicted to be in 1984. Actually, a few things on there eventually did happen in time. Bell Centrex picture phones. Hello. FaceTime, Skype, YouTube, directory assistance calls being charged a whopping amount. Yeah, that happened. Now, we did not have the Bob Dylan Charo wedding. Anyway, back on subject. In this window, will there be more applications than in the 2013 window? Have you had more customers in this window than in the previous one? Well, I can't give you a comparison on customers because we did things totally different 10 years ago. We weren't set up for full service like we were this time. We did not do full service in the 2013 window. We did what was called premium service, which was all we did was provide technical showings for second adjacent waivers. Basically, it's the equivalent of what we're doing it was the equivalent for our wholesale offers. And what we did with wholesalers was that they had to commit to a certain number of these with us, and that's how we did wholesale this time around. But the general public offering was the retail offering, which was full service. So I can't give you that. I can't really compare the two. That's an apples and oranges kind of thing. As far as how many applications are going to get filed, that's very hard to say. Now, 2013 was right on the cusp, riding the coattails of the enactment of the Local Community Radio Act. Now, in 2012 and 2011, or actually in 2010, 2011, when all of this was being, when the LCRA went through, there were a lot of very well-funded nonprofit, national public interest nonprofit organizations that were working this law, and there was a lot of money, there was a lot of support. Prometheus Radio Project actually had physical offices in Philadelphia. There was money going around. Now we are 10 years later. The LCRA is way back in the dust. We don't have that kind of support this time around. We don't have we don't have these well-funded organizations. The promotion of this LPFM window is truly grassroots, without any big nonprofit backing. So there's people like myself, like Sharon that's on here, the people like the Common Frequency, Prometheus Radio Project, various others that are out there in the grassroots trying to push this through. So whether we're going to see more applications or not, it's hard to say. I think we're going to see fewer. Also, too, because of the changes that happened with translators, with a lot of translators moving from rural to urban areas as part of the 2016 AM revitalization, where they were allowed to make 250-mile moves, as well as auctions 99 and 100, which allowed AM stations that weren't able to make those 250-mile moves to get new translators. There's a lot fewer channels available, especially in the urban and suburban areas for LPFMs. So our choices are a little more limited. If we want to compare the 2007 full service non-commercial window with the 2021, yes, the number of applications in the 2021 dwarfed that of the 2007 NCE window. Why? Because there was less spectrum available. Why? Because a lot of it was gobbled up in the 2007 window and those stations stuck around. So, yeah. Will there be another LPFM window? I hope so. I want there to be another LPFM window before I become worm food. Seriously. I think there's still room out there for another LPFM window. We'll know after this window closes. Because one of the first things we're going to do after the window closes and the dust settles is we're going to rerun all of our studies again to see what's still left out there. We're also going to run our little studies to see who can upgrade to LP250, because we're going to be picking up on the LP250 campaigns. We're going to be picking up on that stuff and getting that going. That's one of our regulatory priorities for 2024. I've already been at the FCC already to talk with commissioner staff, and LP 250 has been brought back to the forefront. I had a meeting personally with the chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel, just recently, and while the subject wasn't LP 250, I was able to get the words LP 250 out of my mouth and into her ears as part of a discussion on localism. So, we're getting the word out. And this is something that we're going to really try to push. And we'll just have to see what happens. But overall, I think we're going to probably come in about the same, if not lower, this time around. There was like about 3,500 applications filed in the last window. So again, it's hard to say. Again, I mean, we have 64 in the can right now. We've got some more possibly coming before this is all said and done. And and I'm just one person out here, and that's pretty much where we're at there. Can only another LPFM? Okay, good question here. Can only another LPFM applicant file a petition to deny, or can anyone file? Now, there's a difference between a petition to deny and an informal objection. They both can kind of lead to the same destination, but how much weight they're given and how much seriousness they're given by the FCC is a little different. Petition to deny is a formal filing. That means that you have to do it like a legal filing, putting in, doing everything with the caption format, the little and everything, and making sure that you've got like your information in there, your declaration that this is done to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury and all that bullshit, and you've got to serve copies to the other person and all that, and you got to go through the whole legal mess for that. Now, with that, there's a standing requirement. If you do a petition to deny, you got to have standing, and standing can be anybody that would be served by that station within their 60 dB. It could be a competing applicant in an MX group, or anybody who would have a direct harm as a result of the grant of this construction permit. This can include competing commercial broadcasters, as long as they're in the same area. You're in the same market as a station that's owned by Saga or somebody. Yeah, they could file a petition to deny. And we saw some of that happen in 2013. Hubbard Broadcasting was they were a big bully in the 2013 window with the second adjacent waivers. They were trying to claim that, though, these second adjacent waivers, this is bullshit. This is going to cause interference left and right. And, of course, a lot of them just got washed because there was a strong technical showing that the application would not cause interference. And that's why you need to have hired help for doing a second adjacent waiver. If you do your second adjacent waivers weak, or you just depend on R-free, or you just depend on just, hey, we're here, we're not going to cause interference, I promise, that's not going to get you anywhere. Not going to get you anywhere at all. Informal objections are informal filings. That means you can write it as a letter. You can write it on the back of a napkin. You don't need to do service. You don't need the certificate of service or anything. It's always a good courtesy to do that, though. And also, too, you don't need standing. Anybody, anywhere, including from this shop, and we have filed many informal objections over this past 20 years. Anybody can file an informal objection. You want to do it after the time that the application is accepted for filing. So either it shows up on the singleton list as accepted for, it shows up on the daily public notices as a singleton, accepted for filing. That's when 30-day clock starts. Or after the point system notices come out, 30 days, you can file a petition to deny. An informal objection. But informal objection can be filed actually at any time. There's no pleading cycle for informal objections. Now, with with pleading cycles, that means, there is in the petition to deny, there's not only a set time, 30 days, for filing the the petition to deny itself, but there's also a set time for the other party to file an opposition, and then a set time period for the petitioner to file a reply to the opposition. And that's usually how it only goes. Only, petition, opposition, reply. Now you can follow the same process with an informal objection too. That's how we do it. Well, they'll file an opposition to our informal objection, and then we'll file a reply. And then at that point, that's where the FCC wants you to stop, is after 3. Because what they don't want is a ping pong pissing match going on. Trust me, you don't want that. It's not very professional, and doesn't work out too well there. So, excellent question. The school question sounds more like Virginia Public Television, where the nonprofit corporation is owned by a large consortium of school districts, one entity, mainly interested parties. Also, too, a lot of public broadcasting, statewide ones, are actually state agencies. Georgia is a good example of that. The Georgia Public Broadcasting, that is a state agency. So that's pretty much what we've got there. Please explain environmental effect and attributable interest. Okay. Well, environmental impact, I assume you're talking about that question on the very last page that says if your application is going to cause an environmental impact. Now, this is where things get a little tricky. If there's a couple of different environmental impact issues that we could come up with. One of them has to do with radio frequency, radiation. And this would be, for example, this is more likely at the higher powers than at LPFM, where if you are very close to the transmitting antenna, it causes local radio frequency interference. And in the full power world, we have guidelines. We have a program that we use called FM Model, where we can show that because of the design of the antenna, because of the amount of power and because of the height, that a certain level of radio frequency radiation coming from the antenna does not reach areas that are occupied. And if it does, then we have to mandate fencing for the tower site. So that's why sometimes we'll have a situation where the station's so powerful that they have to put a fence at least 30 feet around the tower site to keep people from going into the area that is over the exposure limits. Environmental impact also can fall into issues in regards to situations that involve certain types of actual environmental things, such as stations that are located in floodplains, in protected areas, stations that are very adjacent to any location of national historical interest, and a location that may be, for example, if you wanted to put a tower adjacent to a building which is currently on or may be eligible to be on the National Register of Historic Places, that will create an impact. There's also possible impacts where it comes to Native American burial grounds and sacred lands and places like that, places either on or off reservation. There's a whole entire process. If there's any doubts, there's a process that you can go through where you submit the information, and then that goes to a state authority that is able to determine whether there's an impact or not. There's also environmental impacts on issues regarding tower lighting. If you're in a residential area and you have a tower with strobe lights on it, there's actually an environmental impact process around that. That's something you have to disclose. If you're on a tower that's in a residential area that has strobe lights, there's a lot of information that's out there. 99.9% of you don't have to worry about that. What the FCC does provide for the exposure is they have a simple guideline that just says that if your antenna is more than 20 feet higher than any human head for LPFM power, if it's more than 20 feet higher, then you don't have any issues. If there are issues, if it's not going to be that way, there is a little program that we could run called FM model, and we could show, okay, if you're using like a Nikon BKG 77, which has a different radiation pattern, we can usually show that, even if the antenna is like about 10 feet or so above a human head at 100 watts, that the prohibited level of exposure doesn't reach human heads. So that is something that, again, that's where hired help comes into play. But excellent questions on that one. Attributable interest is basically other broadcast holdings that you have. You know, when you have an LPFM station, you're on the board of an LPFM. You're one of the 3 board members on the board. You have an attributable interest in that LPFM. If you're on the board of a full-service non-commercial station, or if you have an ownership, or you are an officer of a corporation, of an LLC, of a corporation, for example, or an LLC that owns a full power commercial station, then you have an attributable interest in that station. And LPFM parties cannot have an attributable interest in any other broadcast station, full power or low power, or translator, or TV. Now, there are some exceptions for translators if the translator is commonly owned by the LPFM station. An LPFM station can have an attributable interest in up to 2 translators, but there's specific restrictions. They have to rebroadcast the LPFM. They have to rebroadcast it over the air, and there's a limit on how far away the translator can be from the LPFM station. So, but that's basically what attributable interest is. It's other broadcast holdings. Back in the old days when we used to have the newspaper ownership rules, newspapers, cable TV companies like small independent cable companies, those are still considered an attributable interest. But mainly right now it is broadcast radio and television holdings in which you are an ownership of. Now, let's say you're the station manager at WXYZ, the local commercial station, and you're on the board of an LPFM station. That's fine because you don't have an ownership interest in that in that commercial station. You don't make the final call on what happens on that station. You know, it's up to the board of directors. It's up to the CEO. It's up to the individual owner of the station, depending on how their business structure is. You don't have that attributable interest if you're just a station manager, a board op, operations director, whatever. If you're not on that board of directors and you're not disclosed every 2 years on an ownership report for a full service station, then you don't have an attributable interest. Simple as that. And there's other rules regarding attributable interest. If you want a good definition of attributable interest, go to the FCC rules under section 73.355. That's 73.355. Has lots of information in there about what an attributable interest is. So we got excellent questions here. Excellent questions. Let's see here. Formal petition, you're the legal party prosecuting. Informal petition, you only need to raise issues, and the FCC then investigates and then potentially prosecutes. Both informals I've filed resulted in licenses being designated for hearing and never renewed to that party. One distress sale, one bankruptcy court takeover. Okay. What kind of exhibits do we upload in a community presence established community presence section? I did talk about that a little earlier. You want to have some kind of evidence, some kind of solid written evidence that that the organization has been, or the or the board members have been residing for at least 2 years, consistent at locations that are within 10 or 20 miles. One way to do it would be as an annual is you use one is also include one of the annual report filings that shows everything compliant that's at least that's maybe 2 or 3 years old. The other way is the declaration. Again, I'm going to refer you back to the Form 318 instructions, and I think it's either pages 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, but it's right there in the Form 318 instructions that are available at fcc.gov/forms, and then click on 318, and that will be, and then the information will be right there, and it gives you all these different options. Let's see. Most such FCC filings by the public art emotive garbage. Any viable filing needs to focus on substantive legal criteria, ownership, tech, etc. Exactly right. You need to have some kind of substantive evidence for an informal objection or to fly. Now, of course, REC did a little legal trick back in 2013, and we filed informal objections against 245 LPFM applications that were all associated with Cesar Guel. We did that to fire a shot across the bow. We knew that a lot of them weren't going to stick. But guess what? Some of them did stick. Why? Because we followed them up with specific evidence. We were able to dig up a ton of evidence on a lot of these, and even to the point of where some of them, the attorney just decided to just withdraw the application, then have to fight it. And that's what happened there. But also, too, keep in mind that those informal objections and a lot of that was also feeding what would turn out to be eventually a much larger, wide-scale investigation on Antonio Cesar Guel and Hispanic Christian Community Network, which is currently right now before an administrative law judge. And one of the things that the Enforcement Bureau and the Media Bureau want out of this hearing is they want Cesar Guel to be completely banned from broadcasting anything, assisting any station or doing anything. Cesar was involved in the 2000 window, and super involved in the 2013 window, and was a cause of a lot of problems. And we were able to show that he was selling construction permits under the table, because he was selling them while we had the applications held for objections. I've actually talked to the people who were buying the applications. So we were able to get some good information out. And like I said, it got to the point of where they pretty much started to throw their hands up, because we were showing, they were putting applications on public land. They were putting applications at sites that they weren't supposed to be at, ones that they don't have site assurance. It's the new site assurance rules that went in, the requirement that you have to put it on the application now. A lot of that happened because of the Cesar Guel informal objections, which the FCC did run with for a while, and they did do investigations, and they did find that they did not have reasonable site assurance, especially because what they did was they just selected any American Tower location and just decided to drop it there. And the FCC followed up. Now we have the requirement site assurance has always been required on non-commercial applications. But because of what happened with the 2013 issues with Cesar Guel and the REC informal objection, the FCC's increased awareness of the pattern filing, and a lot of that attributed to the requirement now that we have to put the name and phone number on the application for site assurance. So whether you like or hate that rule, I hate to say it, but I'm actually a slight part of that rule being there. But the rule is good because we need it there. We need to make sure that people aren't just randomly dropping facilities wherever they want to. We have to make sure that they have assurance that they're able to use that site if they're granted. Now we have something out there in stone. If anything, I wanted a full letter to be uploaded to the application, not just his name and phone number. The FCC went with name and phone number just because it was simpler to deal. So that's pretty much what we've got there. Okay, let's see. Fence size is an AM issue besides trespasser security. FM only matters with incredibly short towers or building roofs absent very high power. Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. You don't always need to fence your towers. And for FM. AM you do because the entire tower is energized. You touch an AM tower, But FM towers, yeah. The only part where there's that is dangerous to touch is the area that the radiating portion of the antenna that's mounted on the tower. But the thing is the amount of radiation exposure, if it reaches a certain level, it's like 200 something squared. There's a certain level that we go, that we use. And the 200 level is the one that's for general public exposure. If it exceeds 200, then you have to take other measures such as fencing and such like that. There's also requirements of warning signs. I'm not going to get too detailed into that, but because that's kind of a post-construction kind of a question. That's something we don't have to worry about for the application process. We do have to worry, though, we do have to indirectly worry about the RF exposure numbers. And again, that's why there's a if you go to the Form 318 instructions, there's a worksheet that does not have to be enclosed with your application. And as long as you meet the worksheet, you can check no on that environmental impact question, as long as the other issues don't apply. And the instructions do tell you what those other environmental issues are, by the way. And you can just check it no and be good to go. If it doesn't meet it, then yeah, we might have to look at other issues, and we might have to go to FM model and do that and all that good stuff. So we can do that. And let's see, blanketing. Yeah, blanketing is an issue. Blanketing is not as much of an issue with LPFM as it is with full power. Blanketing interference is radio frequency that's coming from a very very close to the transmitter, and the higher excuse me, the higher power that you have, the more likely that you're going to have blanketing interference. And blanketing interference pretty much interferes with radio listening all the way across and can even interfere with other services. There was a recent case up in Seattle involving an AM station that was upgrading power to 50,000 watts. There was a lot of complaints of blanketing interference from the AM station, that it was causing interference to various things, and it was causing problems with like garage door openers and Wi-Fi systems and all kinds of weird shit. And I think a lot of that was NIMBYism. Some of those blanketing, I don't think a lot of those blanketing interference cases were legit. I think they were NIMBYs because this involved Bainbridge Island, and it's kind of a more semi-affluent area of the Seattle area. Then that's they just didn't want 50,000 watts in their backyard is basically what it was. So yeah, we've got that. So yeah, it is a very trivial issue for LPFM, but just because of how low the powers are. And I would not be worrying too much about blanketing interference. I have not heard any real complaints of blanketing interference for an LPFM at 100 watts or less ERP. One of the things, of course, too, is that crappier receivers, crappier phone connections and things like that. We used to have a problem with phone connection with telephones. And when I lived in Los Angeles, for a while, I was working for the Pacific Bell, the local phone company out there, and I worked in their 611 repair call center. And, one of the bigger complaints that we got, especially from certain parts of town that were near the station, was we used to get complaints about interference from 1580 AM in Los Angeles coming in over their phones and coming in over their hairdryer or whatever. So, somebody picks up their phone and says, I'm picking up my phone and I hear rap music, and it's like, yeah, that's 1580, and that's, so yeah. Those, like I said, that's very rare in the LPFM world. Very rare. Very rare in the LPFM world. Let's see here. Can we see an example of how a informal objection is made? I really can't. I really don't have anything I can immediately show you. If you go to recnet.com/filings, you could see some of the informal objections that we have filed over the years there. So I'm going to refer you to recnet.com/filings, and we have pages full of FCC filings that we have done over the years. And we can go there. Let's talk about some changes that have happened since the last window. A lot of things have happened since 2013. Of course, the application filing is now done in LMS, no longer in CDBS. CDBS has been retired. Finally, slow, painful death. AM, I'm going to take this jacket off. AM was the last service to use CDBS, and those days are long gone. And so everything is now being handled through the LMS system. One of the things, a question that did come up actually on one of the groups, regards a change in the way that LMS handles a certain question versus the way CDBS did. In CDBS, when you selected what kind of an organization you were, it had an option for educational organization and educational institution as two separate things. And then, of course, public safety and tribal. The new form only has three choices, either educational institution, public safety, or tribal. So everybody who is educational, that has to do the educational statement, go under all those rules. They just select that they're an educational institution. Even if they're not a K through 12 school, they still would select educational institution there. So that's just a quickie that just came up today. But yeah, the actual application handling is quite a bit different in LMS than it was in CDBS. It's actually easier, I think. I think the LMS system, to me, overall, once you get used to it, it's a lot less intimidating than CDBS was, because it actually guides you through screens, and you kind of do it a little bit like when you do the H&R block taxes. On the right-hand side, you have the little status bar of how far along you are and making sure that you filled in everything you're supposed to fill in. And then on the left, then on the main part of the screen is, where you fill in the stuff. It still has the same questions like if it was like any federal form is required to, because that's an OMB, Office of Management and Budget, Paperwork Reduction Act, and all those other crazy federal laws that we have to deal with. Now, one thing that we do have that's new since 2013 is the public notice requirement. Now, public notice requirement has always been in the Communications Act. It was never enforced for LPFM. And back in the old days, before just a few years ago, the way public notice worked was that when you were filing for a new construction permit, or you were filing for an assignment of license to another entity, you actually had to put out a public notice. And this involved actually buying advertising in the newspaper and doing in the legal section of the newspaper, You had to buy so many ads in a certain period of time. They had to be worded a certain way, and that was the public notice process. That's just informing the public of this application activity. A few years ago, the FCC changed the rules, and they eliminated newspapers from the equation, and they changed it to a combination of online and over the air. If you're able to do over the air, for example, let's say it's an assignment application or a major change application, then you can do actually just an assignment application. I'll use that as the analogy. You only had to do it over the air. Also, renewals. Renewals has always been an over the air public notice, but but still over the air advisories of your that somebody has filed an application, and so that way that gives the public official notice that they can also comment on this transfer or this assignment or this new station or whatever, and based on what kind of standing they have, they can either file an informal objection or a petition to deny. Basically, anything that a petition to deny can be allowed, is normally allowed for. Petitions to deny are only allowed on original construction permits, on renewals, on assignments, and on major change applications. And in this LPFM window, we're not doing major change applications. Instead, we're filing for new stations with a pledge to divest the old station, which is actually better than a major change because you may, let's say you're an LPFM organization in one city, you want to move it to another city, it's a totally different frequency. I mean, both stations can be on the air. Both stations would otherwise be able to survive. And let's say you move to that other location, you can give your old station away to somebody else, and they can have their station, and you be in the new area. So I like this new rule. I like this new way. This is more of a policy than any procedure, because I think it's because of a limitation in LMS is the reason why we're doing it this way. But this is a better way to do it. Is doing this divest and start over. So you get a new facility ID number. If you do divest the old station to another organization, they keep your old facility ID number, and that's how that works. So the new process for new construction permits, and this is the part you'll need to worry about, everyone, is after the application is accepted for filing, either through as a singleton through the broadcast public notice, applications public notice, or as part of one of the point hearing orders that comes out where you get, where it's mutually exclusive and it tells you what the points are, and you're listed as a tentative selectee. That's the key thing too. If you go on that notice, if you're listed as a tentative selectee, you'll usually be, if you are one of the highest scoring, if you're one of the high scorers in the group, if you're a 5-point applicant, you'll be named a tentative selectee. At that point, then you do have to follow the public notice rule. You can find that in the rules on 73.3580, 73.3580 of the rules. But pretty much what you have to do for most stations is that you put what you have to do is you have to put a link on your organization's homepage to public notices, and then you have a separate page on your site, a landing page on your site for public notices, and there's specific script that you have to put in there for the public notice, and then you can put a link to your FCC application in that public notice, and again, go to 73.3580. You can also go to recnet.com/ and I think it's public-notice. Let me just triple check that to make sure I'm right there. Come on. Yep, that's what it is. recnet.com/public-notice. You can get a lot of good information on there about that. So public notice has to stay up there for 30 days. There are alternatives if your organization does not have a website. But trust me, you want to put up a station website, even if it's one of those free websites on Wix or something. You want to put up a website. of some kind. You want to have some kind of visibility, and you can go ahead and put your even if you just put up a website, don't publicize it, and put your you put your public notice messages on there pursuant to the rules. You're fine. You're fine. The other options involve you going to the a common community website, like one that's owned by a newspaper, like in Phoenix we have azcentral.com, for example, that's owned by the Arizona Republic, and buying whatever space you can to accommodate that, and so obviously it's one way to keep the newspapers in the game in some way or another, since the newspaper option is completely out. And trust me, the newspapers fought this hard during this proceeding. I was very involved in this public notice proceeding. So we've got that. The other change that happened was reserve band, channel 6. Reserve band are the channels between 88.1 and 91.9. We talked about this very early on in the video, and that was that there's some slightly loosened rules. If you're in the if you are proposing LPFM between 88.1 and 91.9, you need to look at 73.825 of the rules to make sure that your station meets the minimum distance separations to full power channel 6s and low power TV channel 6s. That also includes TV translators and Class A channel 6 stations in the lower tier. The FCC Channel Finder tool will tell you if you don't meet those distances. And if you don't meet those distances, there's two ways of getting on there. Number one, contact the licensee of the TV station, get a letter of consent from them, and then you can do it that way. Or you can have hired help. If you have hired help who has access to tools that can do contours like Vsoft or ComStudy or anything like that, we can do these studies here. We do a study that is based off of the FM translator rule. That's the complementary translator rule for this, which is 74.1205, and we're able to use contours. Now, the amount of distance in the LPFM on 73.825 is not just based on the type of TV station it is, but it's also the channel number. So if you're going on 88.1, you're going to have a larger distance that you can be away from that channel 6 versus if you're on 91.9. This is a rule that the FCC has been trying to get rid of. We've been trying to get rid of it. NPR has been trying to get rid of it. A lot of folks want to get rid of this rule. The problem, who's holding up this rule from being completely taken away? Walt Disney. Yes, you heard me right. The Walt Disney Corporation was the biggest objector to us removing the 73.825, 74.1205, and the 73.525, which relates to the full service non-commercial stations. And the reason is because they are the licensee of WPVI Channel 6 in Philadelphia, the only Channel 6 full power TV station that's left on the air that is a network affiliate. That's the reason why they did that. Currently, right now, I believe there's 9 full power Channel 6 stations. There's about 80 or so low power TV stations on Channel 6 right now. So your chances of hitting one of these is very hard, especially the full powers. There is no full power Channel 6 TV station right now west of Kansas. So, but the little low powers are everywhere, and there is, if you're in one of those situations where you have like a very small low power TV station, way out of the way, but still within that distance, a contour study that we can do, a 74.1205 study, could probably get you in there. And if you are able to do that contour study and get in there, you still have to send notification to the TV station that you've done it. And so if they wanted to object, they could. But, whether they would have any leg to stand on, that's another story. But there is that. Directional antennas. Directional antennas, there were some changes in the rules that happened in 19219, what I think it was. But it was there were changes in up until the rule changes. LPFM stations could use directional antennas for two reasons. Number one is if they are a public safety agency like a state or local government that's using an LPFM under the public safety rule, they could use a directional antenna. In 2012, we had that rule extended to also allow a directional antenna to be used in accordance with in part of a second adjacent waiver. And the second adjacent waiver, and I've used this rule quite a few times. We actually have a few applications that'll be coming in this window that are going to use that directional antenna rule. And so one of the things that I did ask for a few years ago with the FCC was I wanted some changes to the way that international agreements were done. LPFM stations, especially near Mexico, if you're an LPFM station and you're within 125 kilometers of the Mexican border, it's about 80 miles or so of the Mexican border, you're normally limited to 50 watts, and that's because of an international agreement that exists between the U.S. and Mexico that low-powered facilities, translators, and such have to be no more than 50 watts in the direction of the other country. And the problem was that because LPFM was considered a non-directional service, it's always going to be 50 watts. Our argument was very simple. They could use a directional antenna and put 100 watts to the north and 50 watts and less than 50 watts to the south. The FCC did eventually buy that, and they got that that was in MB docket 19193, and we were able to get that rule changed. One of the other things is in regards, you can also use a directional antenna to protect in that channel 6 situation that we talked about with the 741205. Now, there is a stupid rule, which a lot of us totally disagreed with the FCC on this, but we understand how it got caught up in this situation. If you're using a directional antenna on LPFM for any purpose other than the public safety application, the second adjacent waiver, or the international agreement aspect, then you are required to get a proof of performance on that antenna, which means you have to go to the manufacturer. They have to put the antenna in a test lab, in a field study. They have to do it on an open range. Usually they use a scale model and they take readings, and then that goes back. Now they're allowing computer modeling. So if that model of antenna has been used before for in one of those manual field study proofs, they can be done computer modeled at a later time. That was another rule change that happened, totally unrelated. But in those situations, then you also have to get a certification from a surveyor that the antenna is located at the right location and it's pointed in the right direction, and you have to get a statement from the installer and all that. Again, that is a rare situation for LPFM. And the only situation where that may come up is if you're using a directional antenna to protect channel 6. If that's your reason for using a directional antenna is to protect channel 6, then you can't then you got to get the proof of performance. There's really no other logical reason other than those 4 reasons to even have a directional antenna with LPFM. Because even if you have a directional antenna, you still have to meet the minimum distance separations. You still have to meet the co-channel. You still have to meet first adjacent. And, you're still considered second adjacent short spacing. But if the antenna positioned in a certain way would prevent the contour overlap or prevent the interfering contour from reaching an occupied structure, then you can use a directional antenna. And again, we negotiated that so you don't have to use a proof with that. But you cannot use it, for example, to get closer to a commercial station. You can't use it to get closer to a translator. You can't do that. Why? Because in the translator world, there's no rule that the translator can seek redress. Let's say you move very close, you put a directional antenna close to a translator, and the translator, even though there's no contour overlap, the translator's getting a ton of interference, the translator should be able to file against you. Now, we have that rule for translators that do that. If a translator comes in very close to an LPFM contour with a directional antenna and it causes interference, there is a redress policy that LPFMs can use to fight it. Now, of course, the translator activity has to take place after the LPFM is in. But there is a redress policy for that. There most definitely is. So again, directional antennas, like I said, unless you have a specific need for one, chances are you probably don't need one. And that's something we can talk about if you ever need anything like that. Also, get the ideas out of your head about, it's like ham radio. You put up a 7-bay Yagi going, and you'll get 150 miles on 2 meters. That doesn't work in our radio because we use effective radiated power. If you have a high gain antenna, guess what? Where you still have to have, if you're authorized 100 watts effective radiated power, that's 100 watts from the antenna. So if your antenna has got a good 7 dB of gain, guess what? You're pulling back on that transmitter. You're pulling back on that transmitter power and taking that down. Likewise with a single bay antenna, a single bay circular polarized antenna like a Nikon BKG 77. If you're doing a single bay, guess what? That's a negative 3 dB gain. If you have a 100 watt station, you're only using a single bay antenna, guess what? You're going to be pumping out 250 to 300 watts of power from that transmitter because of the gain, or the lack of in that case. So there we go with that. Okay, yeah. Redress if the FCC bothers to enforce their own rules. Well, actually, they've been doing somewhat well on the translator, the 74, 1203, and 1204 translator interference rules. They've been doing fairly good on that. We've gotten some LPFM victories over the, not me personally, but there has been some LPFM victories over the past few years under the new 74, 1203, and 1204 rules after they changed them back in 2019. That rule is, that rule is definitely is definitely out there, and it is it's a slow process, but it is, things are being done there. Now, we talked a little earlier about one of the other changes, of course, was the site assurance, making sure now you have to put the name of the party and the the name of the party, their phone number, and their affiliation for the site assurance. One thing is that if you are putting a station on a private residential property, and that private residential property happens to belong to one of the board members of the LPFM station, you just can't check yes and NA. What you want to do is you want to check yes, yes, and then put the property owner's name in that section. The reason? Remember, LPFM stations are owned by organizations, not individuals. The board members are only caretakers of the corporation. Unless the applicant is the titled owner of the property, unless the organization, the nonprofit is, then you can check, then you can leave off the name and phone number and do the yes and NA on site assurance. For example, a school and it's going on the school campus. That would be a case of a yes and NA. City government, they're going on one of the buildings. That's a yes and NA. But if it's going on like your private, someone's private residence, even if it's your own, you do have to put your name and phone number there and do it as yes and yes on the site assurance question. Wow, we're running long here. We mentioned this briefly before. Applications cannot be amended to remove pirates. If you file an application, what had happened before was that the rules allowed you before, if you filed an application and you had a pirate on there and it was discovered that they were a pirate, somebody filed an objection and said, yeah, they're a pirate, FCC dismisses. They filed for reconsideration, took the pirate off the board, and filed for reconsideration with the pirate off of there. The FCC let it go through because the pirate was no longer there. That loophole was zipped up in MB Docket 19-3 about a few years ago. And now, that's a fatal. So make sure you're vetting everybody for past piracy. And there's no specific indication from the FCC ever on a statute of limitation, but there has to be solid evidence that they were involved in pirate activity, and that's usually a notice of unlicensed operation. They've got a new name for it now, notice of unlicensed pirate broadcasting. Again, any police activity. New York, New Jersey, and Florida are the 3 states that have specific pirate radio laws. So you're going to want to keep, so those are just some of the things that can happen there. Construction permits used to be 18 months when they were granted on the last window. And then if you needed more time, you had to go back to the FCC and request an extension. That's no longer the case. It's now 36 months. You're going to come out of the box with a 36-month construction permit. That's totally different than 2013. That's a rule that we had changed in MB Docket 19193 just a few years ago. That was one that I pushed for, and because it only made sense. Keep in mind that when LPFM first came out, the first construction permits, the original plan was to only grant a 1-year construction permit. And because they figured you can get this thing built, but and then when they did the 18 months, the reality was people weren't able to get them built because there were things that came up, and so the FCC decided to allow the extensions, and we had the extensions for the 2013 window, and now we have the permanent 3 years. And let's see what else. What happened to Stephen? What happened was Stephen Dunifer was a major force to start LPFMs, and some FCC staff used devious CFR. I'm assuming you're meaning Code of Federal Regulations, not to say his name, but to call him out. A pirate case I handled made front page of Radio World. The pirate radio movement did have a lot to do with the creation of LPFM. The petition for rulemaking, one of the 2 petitions for rulemaking, the legal side. Now, keep in mind, you hear a lot about that Prometheus Radio Project, and a lot of these public interest organizations were the ones that created LPFM. They did create the stir for LPFM. They created the awareness. But what physically created the service from a legal standpoint was 2 petitions for rulemaking. One that was filed by a man named Roger Skinner. That was RM 9242. Roger Skinner was a low-power TV entrepreneur. He was a businessman. And what he envisioned was a low-power FM service that was like low-power TV. So that meant commercials. The 100-watt concept came in part from the original Skinner proposals. A 100, and he wanted a 3,000-watt LPFM service. That came out of Roger Skinner, and so that was one proposal. The second proposal was a proposal by 2 individuals, Nicholas Leggett and Don Shellhart. And that was RM 9208. Now, that went totally the other extreme. They pretty much, in the original petition, they were pretty much wanting to legalize pirate radio. They were wanting to use, home-built, home-crafted transmitters. They wanted amnesty for past pirates. They wanted to be able to run micropower. They were talking about this concept of these little 1-watt stations arranged in a cellular configuration. And there was all kinds of weird shit that happened in those early days before 2000. And but yeah, if you look at the history of LPFM before the year 2000, in the years from the Telecom Act in 96 up until 2000, You look at all the original RM 9208 filings from the Amherst Alliance, from Nick Leggett, Don Shellhart. You look at those, and yeah, it was a hodgepodge of let's legalize pirate radio. And then you wonder why the NAB was up in arms. It was because of the 9208, where the 9208 went. I interjected in these proceedings in those early days and tried to add some sanity to them, and eventually was able to encourage Nick and Don to come down a little bit and come to the normal earth. And, and eventually things did calm down. And that's what we've got there. So, yeah. The other thing on construction permits can now be assigned after 18 months, which means, like, let's say one organization gets a construction permit, and let's say 18 months in, halfway into the permit, they've just decided they just can't do it. They just can't build it. In the old days, in 2013 and before, the only thing they could do is just get rid of the license because they couldn't give it to anybody else. Now they can. Under the new rules, after 18 months, they can assign it to another organization. Now, the other organization will have much less than 18 months to finish the job, and they need to be able to put it in a place where it can be done as a minor change. They don't get extra time. They don't get another full 3. They don't start a new 3-year clock. They get the rest of the time on that construction permit to finish the job. But that's a way that we put in, because we saw a lot of failing stations in 2013 that just were not able to do it, and there was no way to give the license to somebody else, and that's what we did in 2013. So as a result, that's one of the lessons learned from 2013. Now we plan a lessons learned petition for rulemaking after this window, based on what happens in this window. So there we go with that. Also, there's some changes to the assignment of licenses that are already on the air. I'm not going to get too deep into that because that really doesn't involve the filing window. And for time sharing, we talked a bit about time sharing earlier, but under the new rules, you can only have 3 parties in a timeshare agreement. Before, you could have as many as you want. We had one group in California that aggregated, that had, it was a very large area that was all daisy chained together, and they had, I think, 8 parties in their timeshare group, and each one of them was able to aggregate 40 points. There was also a lot of accusations of point stacking. In Philadelphia, there was a case that went to the D.C. Circuit because of alleged point stacking. Philadelphia had a 4 applicant group. They got a 20-point aggregation on one of their groups. That's the Germantown group in Philadelphia. So the that was one of the things that was pushed, was to try to calm down this whole thing with the point stacking and everything. And so the most you can aggregate is 3. So most would be, in most cases, 15 points. So that's pretty much the changes that have taken place. Let's see what we've got here. Some more questions. Where does a community access TV channel fall? Are they qualified to be a licensee? Do they have to file an educational mission statement to do it? I'll tell you firsthand, because we do have one of them in our stack. Community access TV channels are usually separate foundations, separate organizations. They are incorporated, at least in the case of the ones I'm working with, they are. So they would fall under a nonprofit. They are a nonprofit organization with the state. So they're a recognized nonprofit. They can file as an educational organization because they would have a educational objective, because what does community access television do? It informs the public. It educates the public. It gives information to the public. It teaches the public on, could teach the public on, on various information on various things and various subjects, and how can it appeal, and the radio station can be used to extend that educational objective through over-the-air teaching and instruction on various from a hodgepodge of subjects, from basket weaving to professional tiddlywinks. I don't know, so there's definitely an argument for that. There's no attributable interest here because a public access TV channel organization is not an FCC licensee. They are not the cable company. They're not the MVPD. They're not the multi-channel video programming distributor. They're not Comcast. They're not, so they're not Comcast. They're not Spectrum. They're not Cox. They're not any of those big cable companies. They're just a small organization that is contracted usually by the city, that holds the franchise that says, okay, you're the organization that we're going to have to program a public access channel that we have put into our franchise agreement with Comcast or with Cox or with Spectrum or whoever, to say, hey, this is this is the conditions of being able to do businesses in our city. You have to give us these access channels: a government access channel, a public access channel, maybe educational access channels that maybe are hooked up to the college or something like that. So no, they are not a broadcast licensee already. So there's no attributable interest there, and as long as they are a bona fide nonprofit that is current in the state, then and they are able to demonstrate an educational objective, and they're able to demonstrate how the station the LPFM will be used to advance that educational objective, then they're good. They are qualified to be a non-commercial educational licensee under the educational path, and again, that would include an educational statement. So yeah. If the group is a nonprofit organization or government agency, it is qualified to apply. All applicants must write and submit an educational statement. Yeah, if they're qualifying as an educational organization, that they do. So yeah, exactly. Sharon's got it right there too. If they are a government organization and they're going in as public safety, they don't need an educational statement because they're qualifying as public safety, but they do need to really, if they're a government organization and they're doing it, then they just need to say, hey, we're the Wicomico County Sheriff's Department, and we're applying, we're the County of Wicomico. We are applying for a license for an LPFM for public safety purposes. Ocean City's fire department here in Maryland, they have 2 LPFM stations. You go out there, all it does is run loops of public service announcements, and the stations are available in case there's emergencies. I work with a LPFM down in southern Texas. South Padre Island. That's it, South Padre Island. And we just did some work for them on their LPFM, and that's what they do. They run emergency information and such on the station. So government can go either way. And then tribal is its own thing. Tribal does not need an educational statement if they're going in under the tribal rules, but they do need indication that they are tribal. Also on the public safety, if you're going in as a non-government agency, for example, a legitimate purpose would be a volunteer fire department company. Although there's no specific rule on this, you should include some information that specifically shows that your organization has a specific jurisdiction that's set by a government agency. For example, a fire district for a volunteer fire company. So you want to show that there is that kind of contract, compact, or understanding with the government agencies, that you are the provider of public safety services within a certain area. Now, back in 2013, we were able to get the public safety exemption for a rural electric cooperative power company that operates totally nonprofit because they're a co-op. They're owned by their customers, and in those cases, we were able to show that because they maintain the FirstNet facilities and some of the various public infrastructure and the fiber that runs between these facilities, that they have a jurisdiction within that area to provide public safety services. And we were able to make a good argument on getting a rural electric cooperative through the 2013 window. So that's pretty much what we've got there. The FCC and Congress play a lot of Overton window politics for an engineering standards agency. If anybody thinks that the FCC is still an engineering standards agency, let's just say this. Today's FCC is anything but. Today's FCC is about very political. It is very much about broadband. It's very much about the business. It is more about these days, it is more about the business than it is about the tech. If I had my way, every FCC commissioner would need to hold a general class or higher amateur radio license. The problem is that we have attorneys, we have lawyers, we have former lobbyists that are on the FCC, not technical people. There's not that many people, and I mean we do occasionally get the career person that comes on to the commission. Jeffrey Starks is a good example. On the Democratic side, Jeffrey Starks came in from the Enforcement Bureau. He was former career. He came to the of course, some of the other commissioners have had previous experiences, but but it's very rare that, it's not like the old days back in the 40s and the 30s, and there were technical people on the FCC. But that doesn't happen these days because it's all about the business, it's all about the money. It's all about auctioning spectrum, radio and anything that's really RF is just kind of like, oh, okay, you're there. Spectrum, oh, you're there. Your technical side, yeah, OET, yeah, you're there. But what you're doing is you're working for us because we want to make sure that we have the technology to do this 5G broadband, now 6G or whatever they want to do next. So yeah. These days, the engineering and technology is kind of an afterthought at the FCC, and you can see it very clearly in their regulation. And the good old days are over with. When they closed the field offices and made the hams go to the ARRL to get ham tests, that's when it all ended. Oh my God. Okay. I know there were some on here, and it looks like we just got accidentally disconnected. Hopefully we didn't lose everything. REC. Okay, yeah, we're having problems. We're having connection issues right now. So hopefully we are back up and running here. So anyway, if you want to get to LMS, it's a very lengthy URL that I have to read out and such. But I made it easy. If you go to recnet.com/LMS, guess what? There's the link right there. recnet.com/LMS. All right, so we're going to go there. Now you need to already have a FCC registration number. That's an FRN, and it's just. And you get that from a system called CORS. And what you're going to use, and in CORS, you have to get an FRN out of there. What you're going to use is the FRN that CORS assigns you and the password that you use to get into CORS. And hopefully I did this right and it'll let me in. It's going to let me in. Let's see. When it hesitates like this after you put your password in, then that means you're possibly on the right path. There we go. Yeah, we'll save that password for the next time. This is the main screen of LMS right after you log in. Now, once you're in here, you're going to want to go over here to there's a blue box that says File an Application. You click on that, and we have an option right now called New Low Power FM Station Construction Permit Application. Click on that baby. That is going to bring you to our system here. Now, what we're going to do is, because there's certain edits and requirements. We're going to kind of put information in, but we're going to override some things just to get us through the edits. So but I just want to familiarize everybody with the screens that are in LMS. So we're going to just start with now. This is a description. This does not appear on the actual application. It only appears in the LMS management system. And honestly, it also appears in the raw data. We don't display it at REC, but it does show up in the raw data. So be careful what you write there, because some of us who have the right ways in will know how to see that information. So we're just going to call this REC test application. All right. Uploaded attachments. It doesn't matter what you answer here. You can answer no. Okay, we're going to go to the next. Then we hit save and continue. Now we go to the next page. Fees, waivers, and exemptions. Well, this is LPFM, so there's no fees involved. Does this filing require a waiver of the FCC rules? Now, the only one the only real waiver that would ever come up in 99, in LPFM cases would be as if you have a second adjacent. Now, if you need to do a second adjacent waiver, unless you've got the right tools, unless you have access to vSoft, unless you have access to ComStudy or some other tool, RF Investigator, some of the various software tools out there that can do waivers, that can do contours, or you have this beautiful knowledge on there's a way you can do it. That is a very lengthy process that involves using the height above average terrain tool. It involves using the curves measurement tool and a couple other ways. There is a way to do it without using major software. If you know how to do it that way, you better send this off to hired help. But if you're on one of those green channels, let's say you're on one of those green channels on the FCC tool that doesn't require a waiver for a second adjacent, you can just answer here no. So we're going to answer here no. All right, now we're going to come up. Now this is the applicant information screen. On this page, we're going to this is the organization that is applying for the station. First, you're going to have to do applicant type. In virtually all cases, most cases, for those who would be watching a video like this, it would be the not-for-profit. If your organization is, if you're a school, a private school, be a private not-for-profit educational institution. But these are the two main ones that you can use. So we're going to call this, let's see, we'll call it Basket Weavers International. All right, and we're going to say the address is 425 South Main Street. We'll say Suite 100, Los Angeles, California, and we'll just use 90028, even though that's Hollywood and where I'm looking at is in downtown. And we'll just stick a fake phone number in there, like 213-555-3825, and some of you know what that spells. And we'll just put in a fake email at a fake domain.com. All right, so once you fill in the applicant information, you can go ahead and hit save and continue. And no, I love Chrome. All right, now you get to the contact information. Now, this is the place where if the FCC or anybody has a question about your application, it'll be mostly for the FCC purposes. These are the people to contact. Now, you can add 2 different contacts on there, and you should add 2. Now, what you do is if you want to add a contact, you do add contact up here. You click on the add contact. Now, it's going to come and tell you is it going to be a legal representative, a technical representative, or an other. If you do an other, it gives you a little blank to fill in. Just do it as a legal representative. And we'll do we'll do Linda Lawyer. And she works for the law offices of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And so we put in an address for her. We'll say she's 77 Sunset Strip, West Hollywood, California, 90069. And her phone number is 213-5201 KFI. There we go. And and we'll just put in another bogus email at another bogus place.com. So we're just putting in fake information, but this is the information on your on your legal contact. This does not have to be an attorney. For most of you, it's not going to be an attorney. It's actually going to be somebody at your organization. It'll probably be you. And just somebody at the organization that knows the most about the radio station. So we're going to go ahead and put that information in there. Stop it. With that pop-up. It's annoying. Okay, so now we're going to add in, second one is going to be a technical representative. And for this one, we'll do the Michi. I should be used to doing this. I've done this many times, and there's no way to automate it. Really. I mean, I probably could with the browser, but I don't like those browser poppy things. The only one I like is the one that remembers your passwords. All right, so we put that information in there. All right. And so once you have your legal and technical representatives in there, then we can move on. Hit the continue button, and you're going to go to the parties to the application. Now, this is where your board members go. These are your board members. These are the people that will have the attributable interests in the station, in the organization. Now, keep in mind, some states require you to have 3 board members. Some states require only 1. Texas, Florida, and several other states require 3. In our FAQ, we do have a list of all 50 states and what the minimum number of board members are. Just for the purpose of this demo, we're going to go ahead and add 1 board member, just 1 board member. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna select option 1. Unless you know how to do we have a way of doing option 2 here within our systems here, but we're gonna do option 1, which is just manually entering the information. So we're gonna come up here. We're gonna have positional interest, and we're always gonna use director for these. Now, the percentage of ownership in voting stock or membership, this is the percentage of votes. Now, normally, a nonprofit organization, everybody is equally weighted. So if you have 1 person, it's 100%. 2 people, each one gets 50. 3 people, each one gets 33.3. 4 people, 25. 5 people, 20, etc. Do not do varying numbers unless you also include a copy of your organization's bylaws that specifically allow for the weighted boards. This is something that the FCC has been kicking back on, so I'm telling people don't do it. So we're going to say we're only going to have 1 person. Member of the governing board, you can enter yes, it doesn't matter. Assets. Remember, individuals do not have any assets in non-commercial radio stations. Only the organization does. this answer in the non-commercial world will always be 0. If this was a commercial station, yes, there would be a positive number there. But in the case of this, it's 0. And so we're going to do Betty, board member. And title is she's the president of the organization. And we're going to put her at 123 Sesame Street in Los Angeles, California. And we'll do 90005. Okay, there we go. And we'll put her at 213555. 7448. Yeah, probably know what that spells. And yep, and her email address, betty@bogus.com. All right, so there's all the information already filled out. And then you can, now if you have another board member that you want to add in there, you can do save and add another, and we'll just go, it'll take you back to that screen again blank, and we'll just let you keep adding them. Or you can hit save and continue, and then suddenly, bam, there you are. There's your board member information. If you're done entering in board members, then we're going to go on to the attributable interest page, which is the next one. And this is just a very simple yes/no question. Applicant certifies. In all cases, really, in all cases, you're going to answer yes to this question. So we're going to make that one yes, and we're going to go on. Next up is alien ownership. Now, any broadcast station in the United States, if there is anyone who is a non-U.S. citizen, and that includes green card, that includes undocumented, that includes dreamers, that includes those from Haiti who are here on temporary protected status. Anybody who is not a U.S. citizen is considered alien in the FCC's eyes. You cannot have over 20%, normal case, you cannot have over 20% alien ownership in a broadcast station. Now, there are ways of doing it, of getting more, but it's a whole proceeding that goes, it's a massive Homeland Security proceeding, and it's just not here. So, like, for example, if you have a board of directors for your organization, and you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 board members, all of them must be U.S. citizens. Now, if you have a board member, if you have a board of 5 members, one of them can be a non-U.S. citizen. We got one board right now where we got 4 from the U.S. and 1 from Haiti. So yeah, you can do it as long as you have a 5-person board. One person can be not a citizen, and you can still answer all these questions as no. But bottom line is, this has to do with the bigger alien ownership rules regarding foreign governments, foreign government agents, and stuff like that. This is new to LMS, to the 2023 filing. We did not have this in the 2013 filing. So this is totally new. Okay, now we get to the fun part. This is the eligibility certification. So why do you qualify for an LPFM station? Is it because you're a nonprofit educational institution? That's that question we were talking about earlier, where it used to show institution and organization as 2 separate ones. Now it's showing as just one. Or tribe or tribal organization, or state or local government proposing public safety. You're always, for what you guys are doing out here, you're always going to want to answer nonprofit educational institution. Community-based criteria. This is the rules regarding localism. So first question. Now, first of all, you need to determine whether the transmitting antenna is in an area that is considered as a 10-mile radius or a 20-mile radius to be local. We have a list of the counties at recnet.com/metro. You can find it there. So the first question has to do with the headquarters. If the organization is physically headquartered or has a campus within 16 or within 10 miles within the top 50 market, or 20 miles within a top outside the top 50 of the transmitting antenna, yes or no. Okay, so that's very simple. Where you measure on the map, as the crow flies, not driving distance, how far away the headquarters is from the transmitting antenna. So if it is within 16.1 kilometers or 32.1 kilometers, if it is, let's say it is. Okay, fine. Now, one sidebar on the because this is a question that came up. Somebody had asked if an applicant is 10.4 miles. Let's say they're in a top 50 market area, and the headquarters is 10.4 miles away. Does it still round to 10 miles? The answer is no. And I'll tell you why. FCC rules are required by law to be written in metric. There is a specific law that requires that these things be metric. And so what you see in the rules is basically what you see here on the screen. It's 16.1 kilometers. Oh, and by the way, which is 10 miles. So the 16.1 is the driver. Is it more or less than 16.1 kilometers? Now, since the rule takes it down to the tenths decimal, then the rounding can be to the tenths decimal. So if a location is 16.14 kilometers, that could round down to 16.1, and that would still be legit. But 10.7 will probably be a lot more than 16.14999 kilometers, so therefore the answer would be no. Now, same question, but now for 75% of the board members. Are 75% of the board members within the 10 or 20 miles, yes or no? Let's say they're not. Let's just say they're not. Now, common misunderstanding from folks is that both of these have to be yes. That is not true. You can do a yes or no, and you can do a no and yes. You can't do a no and no. One of those two has to be yes. For as long as you're not tribal or public safety. Tribal, they're not. We're not talking tribes, and we're not talking public safety, so we're going to answer those as no. Party certifies that no party to this application has an attributable interest in any low-power FM station. They don't appear on the applications or any assignment app or any assignments or transfer controls, or they have any kind of a board membership on an organization that has another LPFM station. Bottom line is that they don't have an attributable interest in another LPFM station. And you want to say, yeah, nobody does. No party to this application has an attributable interest to any non-LPFM broadcast station, including any full-power AM and or FM station, FM translator, full-power or low-power TV station, or any other media subject to the Commission's broadcast ownership restrictions, such as, being a board member for Comcast. In virtually all those cases, you'll answer yes. There are some cases where you'll answer no. And again, those are complex cases, such as universities that have a full-power NPR station or a full-power TV station, and they want to put in an LPFM for the students. There is an exception for that. We've got one in our mix. So that's a good thing. No party to this application has a pending application for an for a low-power FM, full-power FM translator, or low-power TV station, yes or no. And of course, most of the time we'll answer yes on that. Now, if your organization put in an application in the 2021 NCE window for full power, and your application is still pending because of an objection or anything like that, you answer no here. You put in a statement talking about that application, and then pretty much the way it will work is if that application is grantable before this LPFM one, you get the full power and the LPFM gets dismissed. Or if it goes the other way, the LPFM will get the full power. If the full power gets dismissed, then you get the LPFM. So there is one legitimate reason to answer no. There's two legitimate reasons to answer no, or actually one in that case for no. Is the applicant in compliance with commission policies relating to immediate interests of immediate family members? Now, this is an issue that has come up because we ask, one of the questions that I get is, husband is on the board of one LPFM. Can the wife be on the board of the other? The answer is no. You cannot use familial interests to circumvent ownership rules. This happens more in the commercial world. But the immediate family in the FCC is considered spouse, parent, child, and sibling. So your third cousin twice removed, you don't have to worry about. But your little sister, you do have to worry about. Is the applicant in compliance with commission policies regarding investor insulation and non-participation of non-party investors and creditors? That's something way over the head of most LPFM applicants. So yeah, you're not going to be involved with that kind of funding and that kind of backing. So yes, character references, character issues. No party has had any adverse or had any character issues with the FCC in the past. Has the FCC ever said to any of these board members through through an order or through something that says that you have showed that you've lied to the FCC, you've lacked candor, you've showed that that you may not be, that you're not capable of being you're not qualified to be an FCC licensee. If you file for a broadcast application anytime within the next 10 years, you have to disclose this order and everything on your future applications. If you run into that, if that's a situation, which there are, there's a few people out there. I personally know one person who was recently put into that situation as a result of the last LPFM window. There's also some people that were involved in the New Tang Dynasty shadow-owned stations that have that brand on them right now because they lied to the FCC and misled them in their filings. 99.9% of you are going to answer that as yes, because you don't have any of those issues. Adverse findings. This is the one that you're going to need to vet your board members. Pretty much, you want to make sure there's no adverse findings that have been made. That includes any action taken by a court on a civil or criminal proceeding brought under the provision of any laws related to any of the following: any felony, and that's not just broadcast radio related felonies. That's also your child molesters. That's also your drug dealers. That's also your white collar tax fraud criminals. Everybody gets lined up in that. That could even be your felony hit and run and felony DUI. They can all wind up there. Mass media related antitrust or unfair competition, fraudulent statements to another governmental agency. There's your tax fraud, or discrimination. So that is, so you're gonna want to check now if you do have a board member that does have some past felony convictions or past issue, you definitely want to get an attorney. And what will happen is that if they do and they're on the board, you're going to answer that no, and the attorneys, you're going to have a statement put on there explaining what the situation was, who it is, what the situation was. And then that application will be substantially delayed, and the FCC is going to need to determine whether the crime and the post sentencing rehabilitation has made this person now likely to be an honest person to be able to be truthful with the FCC. So there's a whole process behind that. But, best thing to do is vet your board members. If you got anybody that are convicted felons, just save yourself the problem. Boot them. Make sure they're booted from the organization, including the state paperwork, because that can come back and haunt you. If they're still on the board and you don't disclose them, that's another huge issue. That's the one that's going to get you into the character issues. Unlicensed operation, we talked about that earlier. Past pirating. You want to make sure that nobody on your board has engaged in any violations of the Pirate Radio Section 301 of the Communications Act on unauthorized operation. So there's that. Now, right now, this system is going to give me errors because it's going to require an attachment. So it's requiring an attachment for this. It's for for what type of organization it is. So if we go to attachments, now we're not going to actually upload an attachment. But if we were to upload an attachment here, this is where your educational statement would be uploaded. So this is the statement that describes your organization, its educational objectives, and how the radio station will be used to advance those educational objectives. That's where your educational statement would be uploaded. You do it as a PDF file. I prefer PDF files. You can do it as a Microsoft Word file. You can do it as a text file. They look very crappy. Just do it as, you type it up in Word and then do the save to PDF and then upload it. That's the best way to do it, is to do it that way. Now, we're just going to hit back to get out of this. And now, for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to skip by using the navigation on the right. Normally, you would hit the continue after you put in what you do is you'll upload the document, and then from there, you'll hit the back button to take you back to the actual screen, and then you're going to hit the next button to go next, the save and continue button to go next. Okay, so now we're into the point systems. Now I'm not going to get into too much detail about the actual points because we talked about that so much earlier in this process. Now the first question has to do with established community presence. This is the 2-year thing. Okay, in the last 2 years, has the organization or the headquarters or the 75% of the board been consistently within the 10 or 20 miles? Do you qualify for the point that way? Do you qualify for established community presence? If your organization is less than 2 years, then you're going to answer this as no. You're going to answer this as NA. If it is, then you're going to answer it as let's say that it is. Okay, it's asking for an exhibit. Okay, this is the exhibit where you have to explain, you have to prove the 2 years local presence. And this is what we talked about earlier about including the declaration that says, yeah, they've been here for, we've had the headquarters here for 2 years, or the paperwork that shows the organization more than 2 years ago at the same location or at somewhere else within 10 or 20 miles of the transmitting antenna. So that's what we've got there. For the purposes of this, we'll say, yeah, they do qualify. Local program origination, 8 hours of local programming per day. That's your pledge point. You're going to, you answer yes or no. Main studio, that's, that pledge point. Answer yes or no. We're going to put an address in there. We're going to put, I don't know. We're going to put 1010 Wilshire Boulevard. Some old Bell System people will know that location. And we're just putting in fake information. Phone number. It's going to want basically what you're entering in there is what's likely going to be your main studio address. If you don't have a main studio address thought out, use your headquarters address. Your headquarters can be your house too. Now, of course, if you use a home address on the main studio, somebody could call you out on it. So be careful of that. Phone number, make it a local number. We have people that are using non-local numbers for this. And not a good idea. Use a local number. It's not required, but it saves you some issues. Okay, next question is regarding local origination and main studio. This is the bonus point. So if you claim local origination and main studio, you can also claim the bonus point. And so, that can, that magically turns 1 point into 3. And that would be, so we got that situation there. Diversity of ownership, 99.9% of you are going to answer yes. The only time that you answer no is if you are the university that has the NPR station that wants to put in a student station, or you're the public safety agency that already has LPFM stations and you're wanting to add another one in this window, or you're the tribal organization that has one station already and you're adding your second in this window. That would be for that. Tribes and tribal organizations, virtually all of you are educational. You don't have to worry about that. We're going to answer that. No, you don't. You can't claim that point. Established community presence date. How long has the organization been local within that 10 or 20 miles? So, even though the organization might be 30 years old, that might have been local for only the last 3 years. So, 12, we'll say 12/5 of 2020. You can use the calendar too. I just prefer to do it this way because it's faster. Certifies that they've been local all this time. Yes. All right. Now it's gonna edit me. Again, it's gonna want the answer for that established community presence. Again, we go to the attachments and we put in there the proof of the local community presence stuff. So we put that all there. So just for the purposes of the demo, we're going to cheat on the navigation. Now we get into the fun part. First of all, you get your facility ID right up front, which is something CDBS didn't do. This is where you add in your community of license. Believe it or not, but I've had people confused on community of license. What do I put in there? You put in there the city that the LPFM station serves. The nearest community, and now in the non-commercial, in the LPFM rules is very different than the full service rules in this case. In the full service rules, you're required to put a community of license in there that you're able to put a 60 dB contour, at least 50% of that community with your station. LPFM, you don't have to do that. You don't have to have, there's no specific community coverage requirement. So, I can put Los Angeles in here, even though my station is probably covering like less than 2% of the population in the city. I can put it there. Channel, this is where you select your channel. Whatever channel number is available. Remember, we used the channel numbers. Channel numbers 201 through 300. 201 being 88.1, 300 being 107.9. So you select the channel. Let's say it's channel 228. That's going to be 93.5. Now, they built this application just in case we ever get an LP250 service, but right now the drop-down only has LP100. So LP100 is the station class, always will be. This should have no required edits. Once you've put in the community of license and the channel number, we save and continue. Now we get to the technical part of the application. And this is where the technical parameters go in. And so what you're going to need is you're going to need your location's coordinates, and you're going to need the exact coordinates for where you if you're going to put the transmitter like you're going to put the tower next to the building to the west side in the middle, then the coordinates shown have to be on the west side of the building, in the middle, right adjacent to the building to the middle. You got to get it as close as possible. Google Earth Pro is excellent for doing this, and you could use other things. The FCC wants precise on this, but if you're slightly off, I think the FCC will be fine. Just don't be like 50 feet or 100 feet off, because that's when you get in trouble, and that's where people have gotten into trouble. Because if you are off on these coordinates, or you're not operating, if what you build is not what is on your permit or license, that's the same thing as silent operation, and the FCC could say, nope, you weren't on the air. We can legally take you down after 365 days. So you got to make sure that whatever is on your permit or license matches where it actually is located. Do you have an antenna structure registration number? Most of you are going to probably answer no if you're leasing space from American Tower or somebody like that. It may have a registration, or if the tower owner has gone through the FAA process. If it's near an airport, then you may have an antenna structure registration number. Any antenna structures higher than 200 feet will always require antenna structure registration, regardless. So we're going to go ahead and just put some coordinates in here. We'll say 37, 10, let's see, 30, 34, 20, 0, 118. I'm just throwing in coordinates. I don't know exactly where this is, but it's somewhere in Southern California or somewhere near Southern California. So we're going to throw some random coordinates in there. We're going to get the structure type. So normally what I use here is I'll usually use, I just push G for guide tower, or if you're putting on the roof of a building, I will just do B, building with a power with a pipe or mast or tower on top. So whatever one you decide you want to use there. Overall structure height, that is the height from ground level to the very top of the tower structure. And that includes if you do put up like a whip antenna, kind of like a Comet CFM 95 or a Dominator, that's going to be the tip of your antenna. If you're running a side-mounted antenna like a circular polarized, like a Nikon BKG 77, that'll still be the top of the tower, even if the antenna is actually mounted slightly lower. So let's just say it's 20 meters. Support structure height. This will only really come into play if you are mounting on the roof of a building. Let's say we're on the roof of a building. Let's say the building is 6 meters tall, about 20 feet tall. So we're going to put that there. Ground elevation. This is where you're going to need to go and get some information. You can get this out of Google Earth, but there's also a little neat tool that you can go to. And what you're going to see right now, because we have a different version of this tool in-house versus out-of-house. So you're seeing an REC internal version of this tool, but it's the same URL. It's recnet.com/height above average terrain, HAAT. And you're going to be seeing some features that we're going to add at a later time. But for right now, what we're only concerned about is putting those coordinates in there. So we're going to come over here. We're going to put in the coordinates. We're going to put 34. We're going to put 20. We're going to put 0. Longitude, 118, 30, and 30. 118, 30, and 30. Now, this tool is pretty neat because what it will do is one of the things is radiation center height. That's the height of where your antenna is actually mounted. Now, it's not always going to be the top of the tower. It's going to sometimes be a little bit further down, especially if you're running a multi-bay antenna. It's not always going to be. If you're running a side-mounted antenna, the overall and the radiation center will never be the same. The radiation center, if you're normally, as a rule, if you're running like a Nikon BKG 77 or 88, and you're running a single bay right near the toppest of the tower, I'll usually put the radiation center a half a meter down. So 19.5, 19.5. We'll just say 19.5 for shits and giggles in this one. So we're going to put 19.5 in there. We're going to select above ground level. This is a neat thing. FCC tool does not do this, by the way. This is stuff that's exclusive to the REC tool. And there's some of this stuff is not even in the production version. This is in our development version that you're looking at right now. And then we have a neat little feature down here where you can say, okay, I'm putting in a LP100 station. I want the maximum ERP at this height above average terrain. So I went ahead and put those random coordinates in there. Let's see what the tool says. Okay, very good. Okay, so we have a location that is 509 meters above ground level. 509. We're going to say 509.1. So that's our ground elevation is 509.1. And it computes your, so the actual antenna itself is at 528.6 meters above mean sea level. And height above average, so the height above average terrain is 45 meters. And this LPFM feels like stuff. Don't worry about that right now. That's a new feature that'll be added soon to the rest of you. But it does tell us right here that an LPFM station with these exact facilities would be authorized for 45 watts because of the height above average terrain. So we're going to go ahead and save and so we went ahead and put all that information in. We're going to hit save and continue. And I'm going to go back real quickly and let's see if it picked up the right. Okay, they said 47. We said 45. They said 47. So they're pretty close. Direct antenna type, unless, okay, if you are doing the public safety, the second adjacent, directional antennas, you still answer this as non-directional. If you are doing the international agreement or you're doing the, if you're doing the international agreement or the directional for channel 6 or the directional just because I want to do a directional, you're going to do the directional, and then you're going to add the field values that are provided to you by the antenna manufacturer. We're not going to get into that at all. We're going to keep this like 99.9% of you out there. We're going to say non-directional. So we're through that part. Last part, environmental effect. Again, we talked about that earlier. That was the stuff about the radiation, about the migratory birds, about the blinking lights and historic places and stuff. Okay, yes or no? No. Interference, does it meet the 73807 or 825? If you're doing one without a second adjacent waiver, we can answer yes. If you are doing a second adjacent waiver, I always answer that no, because it will ask you for that's where it will ask you for an attachment, and that's where you put your second adjacent channel waiver request. If you say yes, you say no, it's going to require an exhibit. So we're going to say no. We're going to say yes because there's no second adjacent waiver on this one. Reasonable site assurance. This is one. Yes, we do have reasonable assurance. And again, this is that question: is is the applicant the owner of the property? If it's a school or a church, and the actual corporation is the titled owner. If you were to look on the county tax records, if that's the case, you answer NA. Guess what? Nothing happens. But if it's not the case, you answer yes. You get 2 boxes. You get 3 boxes that pop up here. You get a name. We're gonna say Tammy Towers, and we're gonna put a phone number in there of that. And we're going to say, yeah, she's the authorized representative of Tammy Towers Incorporated, whatever. All right. We hit save and continue. And voila. Now we get to this is the application summary. This is just basically all the information that you put in there. If you want to see a copy of your application, you click on the draft copy. And and then we can look at that, and look, there's the application that we wrote. That's exactly what it looks like. That's probably the format you're used to seeing these days. But that is our application, exactly as we wrote it. And so we're going to go ahead and so that's as far as we can go right now outside the filing window. Now, what's going to happen is after 12 midnight tonight Eastern time, there's going to be a link here, right down here in the bottom right, that's going to say click to certify. That's going to take you to another page. Now, on that page, we can't show you, obviously, right now, but all it has is just a couple certifications. It just has a couple of disclosures on there, that you were truthful, that that all this information is correct under penalty of perjury, under certain sections of the United States Code. It also is it's also to say, yeah, we acknowledge that nobody in our organization is denied benefits under the U.S. Anti-Drug Act. That is the same law that prohibits people from having student loans. So you want to make sure that you vet folks for that. And then and then you put in the name and the title of the signatory of the application. That's usually the president. It has to be one of the board members that you put into the parties of the application. So it needs to be somebody that's on this list. Has to be that name at the bottom. It cannot be a station manager. It cannot be an attorney. It cannot be a consultant. It cannot be anybody else but a board member as shown on the parties to the application. The FCC will kill that, and that is not fixable. So remember that. So, and then once you enter that information, there's a big green certify button at the bottom. You click on that, give it a few seconds to think about it. You're going to get your file number. Your application's been filed. Now, you won't be able to see applications that are filed through the like the FCC, like the public view here. When you go into the public search, you will not be able to view your LPFM applications yet. You'll be able to view them after the window closes. We're going to probably be seeing them as soon as 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern time when the window closes next a week from Wednesday. So there you go. There's a ton of information. Now, I've got to get out of here really soon because it is past my bedtime. But I wanted to, let me just clean up the questions, and then I'm going to have to jet out of here really fast because we are way over time on this one. Way over time. And let me see what kind of questions that we've got here. And maybe some of these questions have... Under parties to the application, do you include the entity applying as well, and do we give it 100% of the assets? CDBS, you were able to do that. It's not. There's really no provision to do that in the LMS. There's nothing for like entity like that. It treats everybody as people. There's really no place to do that in this application. And in 2021 with the NCE window, there were a lot of applications that were issued that way. The FCC did not even wink on that one. They all went through. Let's see. The FCC lost a major felon licensee case in Atlanta. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. And and that's one of those issues again. That was one of those where when you weigh in all the facts, what was the crime? How long ago was it? Was there rehabilitation? A lot of various issues, and that's one of the things the administrative law judge looks at, and that was the reason for what happened there. If you're applying for a license at a local chapter, city, state that's different from your national headquarters, how do you provide proof of your 2 years of local presence? Same thing goes for, similar question would go for campuses of colleges. If you have any brochures, any publicity, any like brochures, any information that shows that local, that shows that local chapter, that shows that, yeah, you are actually in that location, yeah, that's good enough. But like, for example, in the case of colleges, because this comes up because there's an established community presence also in the full power world, course brochures are always a good way of showing a campus. If a nonprofit already has an LPFM in one city and is in the process of transferring it to a different unaffiliated nonprofit, how do you indicate that? Okay, if there's already an assignment in progress, they file for a new application. They ask, do they have an existing LPFM? Yes, we do. We have this LPFM station. It's, it's this call letters, this facility ID. Oh, and guess what? We already have a pending assignment application already filed, which is file number And then once that, so those two will be related. What will happen is the construction permit will get granted with a condition on the new location that says the program tests cannot start until that assignment application is not just granted, but also consummated, meaning the deal is has been approved and done. Once it's consummated, program tests can start at the new on the new station, and then you can file the license to cover at that time. So yeah, that's exactly how that works. No. Would you answer no, yes or no to no party to this app? Okay, yeah, you basically, I just answered your question with that one there. Okay. Or is there something to indicate, that if awarded the 2023 license that the applicant, yeah, that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. You are disclosing you're disclosing your attributable interest, saying, look, we have WXYZ already. And we are, we will promise to divest that station prior to our new station being able to turn on the transmitter. You'll get the construction permit still, but you will not have authority to turn on the transmitter. That's how that works. The authority to turn on the transmitter, it's called program test. That will not happen until after the consummation is completed. No. Last question for me. If a group is around for 10 years and another's around for 12, does that end? Does the group with 12 win with a tie? No. I'll tell you. Okay, let me explain that, because I'll tell you where the dates come in. The dates come in in two situations. One, if there are more than 5, let's say the lead score is 5. Let's say there are 5 organizations in that MX group with 5 points. Nobody does anything. Nobody talks to anybody in the first window, the second window. The whole thing stays stagnant, and we're still left after the 90-day settlement with 5 tied 5-point applicants. That's where the community presence date comes in. The bottom 2 are eliminated. The top 3 are kept, and they go into an involuntary timeshare with the oldest organization of the 3 having first dibs at 3 time slots. That's where that comes in. Now, it also comes in involuntary timeshares anyway. If it's a 2 applicant, 2 5-point applicants, and nobody talks, and it goes to involuntary timeshare, then the one with the older community date, they get first dib at the time, and the other one gets what's left. So those are the things that you got to take into consideration there. So that's pretty much that's pretty much how that works. Mutually exclusive groups are that's a video in itself, because there are so many different possible situations that can happen. Reminder, if you do get into if you're stuck and you get into that situation where you are involuntary, guess what? Your license is non-renewable. However, there is a way to get around that, because what's going to happen is your license comes out, nobody talks, because the FCC wants you to talk. So nobody talks, and then suddenly you and your involuntary timeshare partner are both with non-renewable licenses. Well, guess what? You're probably both equally pissed off. And so maybe that'll get you two to finally talk. Because if you get the non-renewables and then you do sit down and talk, and you do come up with a voluntary timeshare agreement, even if it's for the same hours, the FCC sees that timeshare agreement, guess what? Your non-renewable status goes away. You're back to renewable licenses. So reach out and talk to people if you're stuck in an MX group. That's really all I can say. I hope that answers your questions. Last call for questions, because I've got to shut this off. Going once. Going twice. Waiting for the latency lag. Going 3 times. Oh, what the hell? This is Comcast. Going 4 times. Going 5. Are we having fun yet? Oh, hell yeah. We're always having fun. Because, I've always said in my entire life, if I'm not having fun in the job that I'm doing, then damn it, I quit. Well, guess what? It's past my bedtime. I've got to quit for now. Sharon, her situation was that she's planning to divest the old station. That's allowed. That is totally allowed. As long as you disclose and pledge to divest, you can do what she wants to do, which is apply for a station at the other location, disclose that, yeah, if we do this, we're going to divest the old station. This is no different than this is the way we're doing major moves, but this new policy allows the old station to go to somebody else instead of being sucked up with, after the new station turns on. No, what she's doing is totally allowed. Totally allowed. As long as you disclose that you've got the current station and that you're pledging to divest it, this is what the FCC did in lieu of a major move. You look in the I think it's in the July 29th guide. Anyway, kids, I've got to run. Thank you very much for this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, first of all, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there, LPFM Solidarity, 2 excellent LPFM related groups. We're not really letting anyone on LPFM right now new. We're waiting for you to get your construction permits first, and then we'll let you on there. And but LPFM Solidarity, if you're of the grassroots kind of, free speech kind of thing, you're more than welcome to request access to LPFM Solidarity. They're a great group. You're going to find that in LPFM, we have a very strong community, and there's a lot of people out here to support you. So don't worry. You're not alone. The fact that you came to this video to watch this video means that you're willing to reach out to find the right places. So, so there, do that. Remember, buy the book, Low Power FM for Dummies. Trust me, when you're done with this, you will not be an LPFM dummy anymore. You will know a lot, okay? Trust me. You want this book as a reference, and it's definitely some great reading. So I know I'm putting the big plug out there for Sharon and her book. And just remember that this video is not sponsored by LPFM for Dummies. It's not sponsored by DraftKings. Definitely not sponsored by Manscaped. And, well, thank you very much. And we'll catch you here soon. And we'll see you on the other side of the window. Remember, facebook.com/RECNET for everything, recnet.com. Keep up with everything going on at the FCC at fcc.today. And until then,